When my husband and I arrived to view the condo, I stood silently off to the blank side, feigning disinterest while he animatedly chatted with the seller, a foreign investor. But then, hearing a single distinct phrase, I froze, unable to believe my own ears. That day in Charlotte, the weather was stunning. Golden sunlight slanted through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, flooding the pale, wide-plank oak floors, making the entire living room glow as if coated in a thin layer of honey. I stood in the middle of this expansive space, distinctly hearing my heels clicking quietly but coldly against the wood. Beyond the balcony lay a pale blue sky, and a little further out, in the park, by the Catawba River, the trees were just beginning to drop their turning leaves. Autumn in the south isn't as fiery as up north, but it still had something special about it. Something subtle, fragile, that easily touched the soul. My husband David stood nearby, hands shoved into his tailored trouser pockets, pretending to inspect everything closely. He would look up at the coffered ceilings, then lean down to touch the edge of the quartz kitchen island, as if he were some great real estate connoisseur. It made me want to laugh. In 5 years of marriage, I had studied him better than I knew myself. Every time he wanted to appear businesslike, a responsible man capable of making serious decisions, he adopted exactly this persona. But the truth was, if not for the money my parents had helped us with, we would hardly have been able to afford even the 2-bedroom suburban house we lived in. Now on his salary, let alone a luxury condo with a river view, the real estate agent showing us the unit was a woman in her 50s, trim, with perfectly styled blonde hair and an elegant cream-colored suit. She spoke with a polished, confident tone, describing every detail with such professionalism that it was impossible not to trust her. David stood beside her, constantly nodding and occasionally inserting brief questions to show that he was the decision-maker here. I remained silent, slowly, walking around the living area and inspecting every corner. The condo was nearly 1,500 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, with an open-concept living room and kitchen. Everything was finished to a very high quality. From the balcony, there was a view of the glittering ribbon of the river in the Claysdashan distance. The sellers were an older couple moving to Florida to be near their couple and their grandchildren, which is why they were selling quickly. The price the agent quoted was nearly $100,000 below market value. That single detail hadn't given David any peace for the last 2 weeks. He kept saying it was a rare opportunity we couldn't miss. He endlessly repeated that this neighborhood was close to the top-rated private school in downtown, making it convenient for our daughter's future commute. I knew he was fussing like this not just because of the beautiful apartment. Every time he showed excessive enthusiasm for something, the shadow of his mother almost always loomed behind him. My mother-in-law, Gloria Patterson, was one of those women who spent her entire life interfering in every corner of her son's existence. From the day I entered their family, she had never truly accepted me as one of their own. First, she subtly criticized me because my family wasn't old money enough. Then that I was too quiet and didn't know how to suck up to my elders. When I gave birth to our daughter, she sighed and lamented that the Patterson line needed a male heir to carry on the name. Once, I thought that if I were just kinder, more patient, she would gradually change. But over 5 years, I realized there are people who, the more you yield to them, the more brazen they become. Well, what do you say? David turned to me, trying to sound nonchalant. I stood by the window, looking into the distance, and threw back shortly. It's okay. David frowned. What does okay mean? This is the condo we're planning to buy. It's a huge deal. And you only say 2 words? The agent paused slightly, watching us with the polite, neutral expression of an experienced professional. I paid no attention. I walked to the window, ran my hand along the aluminum frame, and carefully inspected the seals. Windows like these, if poorly maintained, can start leaking during hurricane season. I lowered my gaze to the baseboard. The drywall was dry, so everything seemed fine. David sighed, clearly annoyed that I wasn't playing along. The agent smiled. Please, look around. Don't be shy. The building is 8 years old, but the owners took meticulous care of the unit. All the windows were replaced 3 years ago. I nodded and walked into the kitchen. It was spacious, with custom cabinetry and gray soapstone countertops, a Wolf induction range, Sub-Zero fridge, double ovens. Everything was top-tier brands. I pulled on a cabinet door, checking the hinges, then opened a lower drawer. David would never pay attention to things like that. For him, an apartment just had to be bright, spacious, and look expensive. But for me, a home is a place where you live, not just something you photograph to brag about to others. What appliances stay? I asked. The agent answered quickly. The integrated fridge, the range, the hood, wine cooler, the washer, dryer, and all built-in closet systems. I pointed to the corner of the kitchen. Have the electrical and plumbing been updated? Yes. Last year, the owners completely replaced all the fixtures in the kitchen and both full baths. I nodded. The agent looked at me a bit differently now, with the gaze of a person who, by the nature of their job, quickly understands who asks questions for show and who actually knows what they're doing. Why are you asking so much? David intervened. They told us the place is in excellent condition. I turned to him. It's an $850,000 condo. What's wrong with wanting to verify everything? He was caught off guard by my direct question, and pursing his lips fell silent. I walked into the primary bedroom. The room was a good square shape, with a large window overlooking a row of mature trees below. The ensuite bathroom was spa-like, with a large soaking tub and a frameless glass shower. I turned on the Clopes faucet. The water pressure was strong. Hot water came quickly. I glanced into the mirror and suddenly saw how tired my reflection was. I was only 32, but dark circles had already settled under my eyes, and the corners of my lips lacked the carefree joy of the first years of marriage. Perhaps it's enough for a woman just to live long enough in a marriage where she isn't valued, and her face will change on its own. The other 2 rooms were smaller. One could be a room for our daughter, Lily. The other had a small Juliet balcony where one could place a bistro table. Honestly, the condo was truly beautiful. If I were an ordinary buyer, I would have loved it too. But from the moment I walked in here, I had a strange, cold, and heavy feeling in my soul, as if behind the fresh paint and soft sunlight lurked something silently waiting for me. Returning to the living room, I saw the agent already explaining the escrow process to David. David listened with a somewhat vacant look. He had never been strong in paperwork or finance, and the more terms he heard, the more confused he got. Seeing this, I walked over. Please, explain the specifics. The agent immediately turned to me and clearly clarified all the steps. The earnest money deposit, the timeline for closing at the title company, financing, options, closing costs, HOA fees, the legal status of the property. I asked a few more questions about the title insurance, possible easements, and the history of liens on this unit. She answered smoothly, and the more I listened, the more convinced I became. The condo really was good, but precisely because it was too good, too advantageous, David's and his mother's enthusiasm caused me increasing anxiety. At that moment, the doorbell rang. The agent apologized and went to open it. I didn't understand why my heart suddenly started beating faster. A few seconds later, a woman in a navy blue blouse with perfectly coiffed hair and a massive pearl necklace entered the apartment. I recognized her by her walk alone. My mother-in-law. "Oh, what beauty!" Gloria exclaimed loudly, barely stepping over the threshold. "And why didn't you invite me to look together?" David spun around. There was genuine surprise on his face. "Mom, how did you find us here?" Gloria shot him a look. "Such an important matter as buying a home. If I'm not in the loop, then who is?" I stood motionless, feeling everything go cold inside. So, I was right. This wasn't just a family outing to see a condo. She arrived here with the look of a person who already has victory in their pocket, and this caused sharp irritation. In May, she turned to me and smiled falsely. "Sarah, isn't it a lovely home?" I liked it. At first sight, I just politely nodded. The agent invited everyone to sit on the couch for further discussion. I sat on the edge, taking my phone in my hands, as if reading a message. David and Gloria stood in the corner by the balcony. I thought they were speaking quietly, but in the empty apartment, sound carried very distinctly. Besides, I wasn't sitting that far away, and I had a years-long habit. When I felt anxiety, I went silent and observed everything much more attentively than usual. Gloria lowered her voice, but I still heard everything. "Does she agree?" "Not yet," David replied quietly. "She keeps asking questions, nitpicking." Gloria huffed. "What is there to ask about? It's not like she earned this. Money." My fingers gripping the phone tightened. "I told you, that's money her Uncle Ben gave personally to her." "It won't be simple," whispered David. "What does personally mean? Since you are husband and wife, the money is joint. Listen to me. This condo needs to be bought, and it needs to be deeded only in your name. Otherwise, there will be problems later." I sat without moving a muscle. My gaze was glued to the phone screen, but every word, cold to the bone, poured right into my ears. David was silent for a few seconds, then asked, "What if she doesn't agree?" Gloria replied instantly, in a confident tone. "If she doesn't agree, we'll force her. On the day of signing the documents at the closing attorney's office, tell her the bank requires her signature on a quitclaim deed to speed up the procedure. Where you point, she'll sign. She understands nothing about this, so don't worry. You just be softer with her, and everything will work out." I felt an icy chill run down my spine. At that moment, I understood why they were fussing so much. They didn't just want to buy a condo. They wanted to buy a condo with my money and then make it solely David's property. I looked up. At that moment, a sunbeam hit the glass, reflecting a blinding, white light. In this light, Gloria's face emerged with chilling clarity, and David, standing next to her, did not object, showed no dissatisfaction, didn't even look surprised. He just hesitated, choosing how best to deceive me. I quickly lowered my head, opened my phone, and silently pressed the voice recorder icon, and in that very second, I realized that my 5-year marriage had turned down Completely different road. I don't remember how long I sat on the couch after pressing the record button. Probably just a few minutes. But it felt like an eternity. Outside, the sun was still golden, the wind light, and the apartment beautiful as a dream, capable of moving any woman. Only my heart had changed. That vague suspicion that had tormented me for so long took on clear, ugly outlines at that moment. This was no longer female intuition, but naked truth. My mother-in-law wanted to appropriate the blank, substantial inheritance my uncle had gifted me. And David, the man I had lived with for 5 years, was not on my side at all, as I had always thought. Gloria and David were still standing by the balcony. Their voices rose and fell, but in the empty apartment, every word was audible. "I'm afraid it will all come out later, and she'll make a scene," David said. Gloria chuckled. "You're such a coward. The older you get, the worse you are. And what will she achieve with a scene? She has a small child. She needs to preserve the family. You just say a sweet word to her, promise to add her to the Dablea nation, deed later, and she'll believe it immediately. And the money? What her money? She came into this house, lives here, with a husband and child from this family. Isn't her money family money? I'll tell you this. In our time, you have to be smart. And if you aren't smart, you'll be left with nothing." I listened, and my fingers grew cold. Part of me still hoped that David would be outraged, say that Mom was wrong, reject this dirty plan. But no, he just remained silent. And that silence was more ruthless than any words. The agent returned with a professional smile on her face. "If you like the condo, you can put down a deposit today to secure it for yourselves. The owners, I need to sell quickly. I'm afraid if you delay, someone else will buy it." Gloria immediately intervened. Yes, a good thing needs to be done quickly. Such a chance doesn't happen twice. I raised my head and smiled, barely noticeably. The apartment is truly beautiful, but I would like to see a few more options before making a decision. The smile on Gloria's face froze. What else is there to look at? Such a place, and you're still deliberating. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked into the distance, as if truly contemplating the purchase. It's a lot of money. I want to be careful. David walked up to me, trying to speak calmly. "Sarah, I think this option is excellent. If we keep looking, we'll only lose time." I turned to him. My gaze was so calm I surprised myself. The time is mine, and the money is also partially mine. What's wrong with wanting to think everything over? The agent, sensing the awkwardness, smiled tactfully. "It's okay. Buying a home is a serious decision. You need to weigh everything. When you want to take another look, just call me." Gloria wanted to say something, but I already grabbed my purse. "I'm a little tired. Let's go home." Not waiting for a reaction, I headed for the exit. David hurried after me. At the elevator, he held the door and entered with me. The polished steel doors closed, cutting off the outside noise. We were left, alone in the cramped space, our alien faces reflected in the metallic surface. David spoke first. "What's wrong with you?" I watched the slowly changing floor numbers. "Nothing." "What do you mean? Nothing? You just took off and left." "Mom came to help us. Out of care." I smirked, not aloud, but with a barely noticeable movement of my lips. "To care for us. Is that what it is?" "No," David frowned. I turned to him for just a moment, but I managed to notice him averting his gaze. The next time your mother comes, warn me in advance." He froze. She came suddenly. I didn't know myself. Before, I might have doubted whether to believe him or not. But after hearing their conversation, I felt only fatigue. The elevator reached the lobby. I walked out first, through the sun-drenched atrium. David followed. "Sarah, I'm talking to you." I stopped on the steps outside the building entrance. The wind from the river blew into my face, cool and prickly. "David, I want to ask you one question." He was surprised. "Which one?" "In your heart, am I a member of your family?" He looked at me for a few seconds, then smiled strangely. "What a weird question. You are my wife. Who else would you be?" I nodded and said nothing more. There are answers that your ears hear one way, but your heart understands quite differently. Whatever happened that evening when we returned home, I did everything as usual. I gave Lily a bath, prepared a simple dinner, cleaned the kitchen, folded laundry. David sat in the living room, buried in his phone, occasionally glancing at me, apparently trying to understand if I was still angry about the daytime incident. I didn't ask, didn't reproach, didn't make scenes, and the quieter I was, the calmer he became. Only when our daughter fell asleep did I go into the bathroom, lock the door, and play the recording. Gloria's voice sounded very distinct. "This condo needs to be deeded only in your name. Where you point, she'll sign. She understands nothing about this. You just say a sweet word to her, promise to add her to the deed later, and she'll believe it immediately." I leaned my back against the cold door. My hands were shaking so much, I almost dropped the phone. Every word was like a slow knife twist. Not lethal, but causing acute pain. But the most chilling thing was not that my mother-in-law was plotting, but that David knew everything, heard everything, and agreed to go along with this path. I sat on the edge of the tub, looking at my reflection in the mirror. A woman, with hastily tied hair, dark circles under her eyes, and pale lips. 5 years ago, when I married David, I believed that sincerity would be enough. I thought that if I were a decent, tactful, caring wife and mother, sooner or later I would be appreciated. It turned out, no. Some people don't value kindness. They see it only as something to take advantage of. That night I hardly slept. David lay beside me, breathing evenly, as if nothing had happened. I lay with my back to him, eyes wide open, staring into the deep darkness at the ceiling. I remembered my Uncle Ben. A year ago, after selling his successful software company, he gave me a large sum of money and repeated several times, "A woman must have her own capital, both to take care of a child and to save herself if necessary." I laughed back then, saying he worried too much. Now, remembering this, I felt a stinging in my nose. Around 3 a.m., I quietly went out into the living room and opened my laptop. First thing, I copied the audio recording to the hard drive, emailed a copy to a separate, secure email address I just created, and changed the password on my laptop. Then I opened files with bank documents, photos of savings accounts, and the deed of gift for the money from my uncle. I double-checked everything several times. For the first time in my life, I was doing this with the feeling of a person preparing for battle, not just a woman, managing household finances. The next morning, I got up early as usual to make breakfast. Gloria arrived, around 7. Barely entering, she started complaining about how poorly she slept at the hotel and then quickly switched to the main topic. Sarah, yesterday you acted incorrectly. When you see a good thing, you have to grab it. If you hesitate, you miss out. Then you'll regret it. I placed a bowl of oatmeal for daughter on the table, speaking in a level tone. I didn't say I wasn't buying. I just want to look some more. She stared at me. What else is there to look at? To waste time? Or do you not trust your husband? I raised my eyes and looked directly at her face. Previously, such a question might have embarrassed me, but today, it only showed me her brazenness more clearly. Buying a home is serious business. Trust is one thing, prudence is quite another. David, sitting nearby, looked unnatural. He hurried to intervene. Okay, let's have breakfast, we'll decide later. Gloria huffed but said nothing more. I looked at them, mother and son, and for the first time distinctly understood. All this time I had lived not in a family, but on a battlefield. I tried to keep the peace while they quietly calculated what else could be taken from me. After breakfast, I took Lily to her room to get dressed. David followed and closed the door. Can you not irritate Mom? I looked up. How am I irritating her? Well, with this condo, she only wishes us well. I bent down, buttoning the buttons on Lily's dress, and said very quietly, if it were for us, why didn't you intend to put the deed in both our names? David fell silent. Just for a second, but that second was enough for me to understand. He already had a ready plan to register everything only for himself. He evaded the answer. We'll decide that later. Don't complicate things. I picked Lily up and walked past him. I'm not complicating things. It's just that some people underestimate me too much. All that day, I had only one thought in my head. I must study the laws, figure out my money, calculate all their moves before they have time to strike. I couldn't make a scene now, and I certainly couldn't reveal that I had heard everything. To win, I had to be calmer than them. In the afternoon, when David went to work, under the pretext of taking Lily for a walk in the park, I stopped by a coffee shop near the university to meet with Olivia. My college friend now worked as a paralegal in a reputable family law firm. We hadn't seen each other in a while, but Olivia remained as responsive as before. Hearing my vague questions about marital property, real estate, and titling assets in one spouse's name, she looked at me for a long time, then set her water glass on the table. Sarah, has something happened? Yes. I was silent for a few seconds, then evaded a direct answer. I want to understand things in advance. Olivia didn't insist, but explained everything in great detail. She talked about community property versus equitable distribution. We lived in an equitable distribution state, about commingling of funds, about how if money was gifted, personally, like inheritance, clear evidence is needed, and it must be kept separate, about how signing papers without looking can lose you a great deal. The more I listened, the colder I got. All of Gloria's calculations had a real basis and could turn into a real trap if I showed carelessness. When I was leaving, Olivia took my hand. If something happens, don't keep it inside. Call me. I nodded. On the way home with Lily in my arms, the sky over Charlotte turned grayish. A cool wind blew from the river. I looked at the yellow leaves. The wind was chasing along the sidewalk, and suddenly realized very clearly. From today on, I can no longer live as before. I am no longer the woman who only knows how to tolerate and hope. I must be sober-minded. I must save my money, my child, and my path to retreat. In the evening, when David came out of the shower, his phone, lying on the cuisine table, vibrated. The screen lit up, and the sender's name appeared. Mom. I only glanced fleetingly, but managed to see the popped-up line of the message. See to it that she doesn't find out about the papers. I sat on the edge of the bed. My heart was beating wildly, but my face remained calm. David walked over, picked up the phone, read the message, and immediately extinguished the screen. I looked up and smiled. Did something happen? No, he replied quickly. Mom is asking if we'll come for dinner tomorrow. I looked at the man before me and suddenly felt how alien he had become. It turns out that at some moment, feelings can die not from one big betrayal, but from countless small deceptions following one another until there is nothing left that can be saved. I adjusted the blanket on Lily, sleeping nearby, and lay down. In the darkness, I made the first decision for my counterattack. Tomorrow, I will go and check all our accounts. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Outside the window, the sky over, the city was still covered with a light haze. The light was dim, as if not yet awake. I silently went to the kitchen to make breakfast. My hands did the customary work, but my thoughts were far from this house. Since last evening, I thought only about one thing. If David and his mother thought to buy an apartment with my money and throw me out of the documents, then this idea was not born in one day. Such a conspiracy could not have been invented in one evening while viewing an apartment. It must have originated much earlier, quietly and imperceptibly, like termites undermining a beam from within. David left for work around 8. Before leaving, he looked into the kitchen and said to me in a tone rare for him, lately soft, "I'll be back early today. Let's talk calmly." I turned around. My face was still serene. Okay. He apparently calmed down, deciding that I wouldn't make a scene. He didn't know that this silence was the most dangerous thing for those who were hiding something. After taking Lily to daycare, I didn't drive home, but took a rideshare to the bank branch. 3 years ago, David and I opened our joint checking account. Here. Back then, David said, since we are together, the money should be transparent. We'll save together and spend together. That's fair. At that moment, I thought I was lucky to have such a thoughtful husband. Now, remembering this, I realized with bitterness that fairness in the mouths of some people is just a screen behind which a completely different nature hides. In the lobby, a young bank teller recognized me and smiled politely. "How can I help you?" I handed her my ID and debit card. I would like a printout of transactions on the joint account for the last 12 months. She verified a few details and started printing. I sat waiting, clasping my hands under the table. Only when I took the stack of papers in my hands did I truly understand why. For the last months, I had a constant feeling that money from the account was leaving somehow too quickly. Every month, a certain sum left the account. Sometimes $500, sometimes $800, and, occasionally, over $1,200. The amounts varied, but the transfers were regular. The recipient was the same account number. In total, over 12 months, it added up to nearly $12,000. I looked at these figures, and my eyes stung. Before this, David explained to me that there was less money in the account because prices were rising. Daycare, fees for Lily increased. He made some contributions for work, helped my parents, then his. I believed him, or rather, I never thought I would have to doubt. enough to check every line of my husband's transfers. Now, all his old explanations seemed simultaneously ridiculous and humiliating. It turned out the stupidest one in this marriage was me, the one who always considered family a place where you can relax and not expect a stab in the back. I walked to the teller window with the printout and asked, "Can I find out information about the account to which this money went?" The employee looked at the papers and shook her head. "We cannot provide personal information of the recipient without an official request or subpoena." I bit my lip. This is my joint account with my husband. Money is constantly being debited, and I know nothing about it. I just want to make sure it's not one of our relatives. She was in confusion, probably seeing the expression on my face and understanding that it wasn't about petty cash. She got up and went to consult with the manager. A few minutes later, a middle-aged man approached me and spoke, softly but cautiously. "By policy, we cannot provide full information. However, since you are a co-owner of the sending account and the recipient is also within our bank, I can preliminarily confirm that this is a personal account, opened in the name of Gloria Patterson." Hearing this, I felt a roaring in my ears. Although I guessed, the moment of confirmation felt like being doused with ice water. My mother-in-law. For a whole year, David regularly transferred money from our joint account to his mother, without saying a word to me. I thanked the manager, took the papers, and left the bank. The sun was already shining outside. It was crowded. The noise of cars, honking, and couriers yelling merged into the usual hum of city life. I stood under a tree near the bank entrance, watched the flow of people, and felt like I had ended up outside the bounds of some bad dream. They started taking my money, not yesterday. They had been doing it for a long time. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to come to my senses. This is not enough. These are just hints. I need more evidence. The more, the better. Standing there a little longer, I called Olivia. She picked up immediately. "Well," I said very shortly, "I just found out that David transferred over $12,000 from our joint account to his mother." Silence hung on the other end of the wire for a few seconds, and then Olivia sighed heavily. "I told you something was wrong. What should I do next?" "If you have the statement, guard it like the apple of your eye. Photograph it, save it in several places, and then immediately secure your personal money. Don't let them get to it." Hearing this, I suddenly remembered my personal account, where the bulk of the inheritance gifted by my uncle lay. Until now, I thought I was careful enough, keeping it separate and spending it only on large family needs or emergencies. But now I wasn't sure that David knew nothing about it. He saw me open the banking app, took my phone, sat next to me when I checked the balance. If he really wanted to, he could figure it all out. I immediately went to the second bank branch. Here I had opened a personal, high-yield savings account before marriage. The money from my uncle still lay there almost untouched. I withdrew only small amounts to pay for Lily's special classes and for the most necessary needs. This time I didn't check the balance, but immediately asked to change all passwords, set up two-factor authentication with a new app, block transactions from unfamiliar devices, and add a verbal password for phone inquiries. The relationship banker asked, "Do you want a consultation on investments or to move money to a CD?" I thought for a second and nodded. Keeping money in a standard savings account was already unsafe if they tried to freeze assets. After a detailed consultation, I decided to divide the sum into 3 parts. I put one part into A short-term certificate of deposit transferred another to a completely new account at a different bank that only I knew about, and left a small part for current expenses in the existing account, but now heavily secured. I finished all the procedures, but my hands were still icy. When I left the bank for the second time that day, I had the feeling that I had taken a step back from the edge of the abyss, but only one step, because if I didn't start counterattacking, sooner or later they would find another way. In the afternoon, I picked up Lily from daycare and returned home as if nothing had happened. David hadn't arrived yet. Gloria called around 6. "Sarah, David said he'd be back early today. You talked to him properly, I think. You are dragging your feet in vain with this condo." I stood in the kitchen, stirring soup with one hand, pressing the phone to my Sullivan ear with my shoulder. I realized she wouldn't let up. A woman should take care of the family, not count every penny. A beautiful home, a calm husband, this is happiness. I listened to her every word and felt a chilling irony. The person who quietly siphoned money from me through her son's account and planned to deceitfully force me to sign away property rights was teaching me about happiness. I answered very softly, "Yes." She apparently sensed that I had become more obedient, and her tone softened. "I'm only trying for your sake. I do everything with thought for David's and my granddaughter's future." I looked at the simmering soup and suddenly asked, "But what about my future, Gloria?" Silence reigned on the other end of the wire for a moment, and then she laughed, fiercely. What strange words. Since we are one family, the future is one for everyone. I said nothing more, just said goodbye and hung up. It became quiet in the Pardis kitchen. Only the quiet boiling of water was audible. I clearly understood. In her view, one family is only she and her son, and I and my daughter. If we had any value, it was only thanks to the money I brought and my ability to service her son's life. In the evening, David really returned early. He brought Lily a box of expensive cupcakes. Entering the house, he ostentatiously washed his hands and played with her a little, as if trying to restore the image of a caring husband and father. I silently set the table. When Lily ate, I took her to her room to look at the Blanc Simpsons picture books. David sat opposite me at the dinner table. "Sarah, yesterday I got heated, said the wrong thing. I didn't look up, putting food on my plate. I understand that you are cautious, and that's right, but Mom is getting on in years. She just worries too much." I set down my fork and finally looked him straight in the eyes. "Worries so much that you had to hide it from me." His face changed slightly, but he quickly pulled himself together. "Hide what?" "Our joint account." After these words, David seemed to turn to stone. He stared at me, his mouth opened slightly, but he couldn't utter a word. I continued in a level voice. "Over the last year, you transferred over $12,000 to your mother. When were you intending to tell me about this?" David was silent for a few seconds, then jumped up. "Who told you?" I smirked. "It doesn't matter who told. What matters is if it's true." He sat down. His face was constantly changing colors. After some time, he sighed, heavily. "Yes, I transferred a few times. Mom was doing repairs, then helping relatives. I was afraid you would worry, so I didn't say a few times." I picked up my phone, opened a photo of the bank statement, and slid it to him. "Almost 13,000? This is called a few times?" He looked at the screen, pressing his lips tightly together. "I intended to tell you gradually." "Gradually is when? When nothing is left in the account?" David started to get angry. Don't exaggerate. It's also family money. What's wrong with me helping my mother? At these words, I laughed. A short but such a bitter laugh that I surprised myself. Family money. I watched him unblinking. Then why? When you secretly transferred money to your mother, didn't you say it was a family matter? Why? Didn't you ask my opinion? Or in your view, family is only you and your mom? David slammed his hand on the table. Sarah! Lily in her room started and turned around. I immediately softened my voice, calmed her down so she would continue playing, and then looked at my husband again. In my eyes, he was no longer the man I once loved. This was simply a cornered person showing his true essence. He lowered his voice, apparently remembering that there was a child in the house. Okay, I'm guilty for not saying straight away, but it's not like I spent this money on partying. Mom had it hard. I helped. I couldn't just watch. Hard? I asked. She had it so hard that she was taking money from a joint account while simultaneously persuading us to buy an $850,000 condo. David went numb. I clearly saw that he was afraid. Not because he was wrong, but because I knew too much. At that moment, his phone vibrated. The name Mom lit up on the screen. He hastily turned the phone screen down. I watched this movement, and my soul felt even colder. I realized today's conversation was just the beginning, and if I don't go to the end, I will lose everything. David's phone vibrated 2 more times and went quiet. He didn't answer, but I knew who was on the other end and what they were so worried about. The kitchen suddenly felt stuffy. My daughter was sitting in her room, turning the pages of a picture book, while the man opposite me was looking for a way to patch up the net that had just been torn. David cleared his throat, trying to change the topic. I told you, I didn't intend to hide this money from you for long. It's just that lately there have been too many things to do. There wasn't a convenient moment. I looked at him and slowly pronounced, if I hadn't gone to the bank myself today, would you have intended to tell me about this? He pursed his lips. Sometime I would have said. I nodded. Probably, at that same convenient moment, you would have said also that the condo by the river would be deeded only in your name. What? As soon as I uttered this, David's face turned pale. However, he tried to maintain calm. His eyes betrayed him in the first second. There are secrets, which, once called by name, immediately reveal themselves in all their ugly nakedness. What nonsense are you talking? I quietly laughed. Nonsense? He stood up, pushing back the chair, and his voice became sharper. Sarah, don't make things up. I'm tired as it is. I also stood up. I didn't shout, didn't bang on the table, but at that moment I was surprisingly calm, as if the pain had passed its most acute stage and only cold metal remained. Whether I'm making it up or not, you know perfectly well in your soul. David turned away, putting his hands on his hips. He always adopted this pose, when cornered, as if you don't look the problem in the face, it will resolve itself. I continued, David, I'll ask only once. Did you intend to buy an apartment with my money and title it only in your name? He spun around sharply. Your money, my money. You talk like we are strangers. We are husband and wife. I looked him straight in the eyes. Since we are husband and wife, everything should be honest. Why did you transfer money from our joint account to your Mother without asking me? Why did you allow your mother behind my back to make plans with documents? Why is everything concerning my money considered a family matter by you, but my right to know about it isn't worth even mentioning? David fell silent. He opened his mouth and closed it again. I clearly saw him, calculating what was better. Deny everything to the end, or backpedal to smooth over the situation. At that moment, Gloria called directly to my phone. I looked at the screen, then pressed the answer button, putting it on speaker. Her voice immediately rang out, in the room, sharp and impatient. Sarah, I'm calling David, and he isn't picking up. Did you talk? David quickly stepped toward me, trying to snatch the phone, but I stepped back. Yes, we are just talking. Gloria, not yet realizing that something was wrong, continued. Well, you be softer there. It's not worth getting so stressed over an apartment. What's good for the husband is good for you. Keeping my eyes on David, I asked very quietly, and what, in your opinion, is good for my husband, Mom? On the other end of the wire, silence hung for a second, and then she quickly laughed. Well, how's that? To buy a good apartment, accumulate property for the future, to take care of the granddaughter later. And the fact that the condo will be deeded only to David, is that also for the sake of the future? The air in the room seemed to freeze. Silence reigned on the other end of the tublo. Wire, too. I heard her breathing. When she spoke again, her voice changed. Completely. What are you talking about? Who told you such a thing? I didn't answer her question. I want to hear it from you. Gloria started raising her voice. Sarah, who filled your head with nonsense? I never plotted anything bad against you. I just wanted everything to go smoothly. Women like you always judge by yourselves. I looked at David. He no longer dared to look me in the eyes. I pronounced, slowly, clearly, articulating every word. I judge by no one. I just know that if you truly considered me a family member, you wouldn't try to simultaneously take my money and figure out how to leave me without a share in this apartment. Gloria exploded immediately. Who was taking your money? Speak carefully. What? Your money? I smirked. The inheritance Uncle Ben gave me. The money from our joint account that David has been transferring to you for a whole year. Shall I continue, Gloria? David walked over. His voice became low and threatening. Sarah, enough. I didn't look at him. On the other end of the wire, Gloria was silent for a few seconds, and then switched to her usual tactic. She started sobbing. Oh my God, to live to such years, so that my own daughter-in-law suspects me of such a thing. I try for your sake, and I'm accused of wanting to take money away. No, good deed goes unpunished indeed. I listened and felt fatigue. For 5 years, every time she found herself in a losing situation, she used the same technique. Cried, listed her merits, portrayed herself as a victim. Previously, I always got lost, felt guilty, thought, did I go too far? But now her tears caused only coldness in me. Gloria, don't cry. If you really have nothing to hide, let's all meet. Tomorrow me, David, and you at a real estate lawyer's office and clarify everything. The more transparent, the better. This time she stopped crying. Her voice became hard. You intend to involve outsiders in our family affairs? I just want clarity. What clarity? If husband and wife start counting everything, is that a family? Precisely because I want it to be a family, I should clarify everything. I replied. She didn't have time to say anything. I hung up. The kitchen plunged back into silence. David looked at me, as if at a completely stranger. I understood his feelings, because I myself felt that I had just stepped over some line. Since last evening I felt pain, shock, but having faced them face to face, some part of me began to harden. David spoke first. His voice was low and tired. You are exaggerating. Everything. Where exactly? We haven't decided finally on the purchase yet. Mom just suggested several options, and you cling to a couple of words and draw such conclusions. It's unfair. I looked at him and suddenly realized that he still hadn't realized his main guilt. He was just afraid he got caught too early. Then explain. Explain what? Why did your mother know in advance about the papers? Why did she write to you? To hide this from me? Why did you transfer money to her behind my back for a whole year? Why do you still talk as if you have nothing to do with it? He was silent. I lowered my voice. David, if you still want to talk like two civilized people, tell the truth at least once. Perhaps these words touched him. David sank heavily onto a chair, ran his hand through his hair. Real confusion flickered on his face. Mom really said that it's better to register everything in one name to simplify. The procedure, why exactly yours? Because my credit score is better, and the money. He didn't answer immediately. I looked at him for a long time, then asked, Did you think I would sign the blank papers without reading? He closed his eyes for a moment, then averted his gaze. This silence was the blank answer. A lump rose in my throat. Although I heard everything, knew everything, was morally ready. But at the moment when he confirmed everything with his cowardly silence, I felt something slowly crack in my chest. I turned away and went into the living room. My daughter was sitting on the rug, hugging a pink plush bear. Seeing me, she looked up and smiled. Mommy, I'm coloring. I sat down next to her, hugged her, kissed the top of her head. The familiar scent of baby shampoo hit my nose, and my eyes stung. What does a 4-year-old child need from a home? Only for adults to sincerely love her. But the adults around her were counting money, papers, property, using her future as a pretext to justify their greed. In the evening, having put Lily to bed, I went out into the living room and saw that David was still sitting there. 2 glasses of water stood on the table. Probably, he wanted to continue the conversation or try to fix everything. But I no longer had the strength to listen to his evasive speeches. He looked up. Sarah, I know you are angry right now, but we can sit down and resolve everything. I sat opposite. Okay, let's resolve. In order. He watched me intently. First, from tomorrow you stop any transfers from our joint account to your mother without my consent. He pursed his lips. Second, if we talk about an apartment again, I will personally look at all documents. No sign on trust. Sign in advance. Or someone will explain for you. His face became gloomier. Third, I want to see your phone. He recoiled. What? I repeated in a calm voice. Your phone. Right now. The text logs between you and your mother. David jumped up as if hit by an electric shock. This is too much. I also stood up. Too much? A person who hid money, plans, hid his mother behind his wife's back, considers showing a phone too much? He gripped the phone in his hand. His face was constantly changing colors. I knew I hit the sorest spot. I looked him straight in the eyes. If you have nothing to hide, What are you afraid of? David was silent for a long time. Finally, he took the phone and stepped back. His voice became cold. I do not agree. I nodded. Strangely enough, at that moment I no longer felt pain. Only an icy, ruthless clarity opened up before me. This man not only betrayed me in thought, he was actively defending his secrets. I went into the bedroom, opened a dresser drawer, and took out a folder with documents where lay printouts of statements, photos of accounts, documents on the gift of money from my uncle, and a small notebook in which I began to record everything that happened from the day of viewing the apartment. David followed. Panic was heard in his voice. What are you doing? I answered without looking up. From this moment on, I will record everything that needs to be remembered. Do you want to turn this house into a battlefield? I froze for a second, then turned to him. I didn't turn it. You and your mother? I did it a long time ago. David froze. I closed the folder and put it in the bottom of my locked carry-on bag, and then for the first time, in a calm, cold voice, said what I myself did not expect from myself so soon. If you continue to hide things, my next step will be a visit to a divorce lawyer. He looked at me with wide eyes. And in my head, a next plan was already clearly emerging. Tomorrow, I must open his phone by any means. That night, I hardly closed my eyes. David lay, turned away. His breathing was heavy, intermittent, not like the sleep of a calm person. Probably, he also understood that everything had gone too far, but was still clinging to a faint, I hoped that I would calm down, that in the morning I would wake up the same as before, would again make breakfast, take daughter to daycare, and be silent, as many times before, but I myself knew that that woman remained in the past at the very moment. I heard their conversation in the apartment by the river. Once, seeing the true face of the person nearby, no one can return to the former blind life. Around 3 a.m., David stirred. The dim light from a nightlight in the hallway fell on his face, making his features blurry. I lay motionless, closing my eyes. He sat up, took his phone, looked at it for some time, and then put it back. I heard his quiet sigh in the darkness. After some time, he lay down again, waiting another 20 minutes. When his breathing became deeper and more even, I cautiously sat up. His phone lay on the bedside table. My heart was beating so hard that it seemed to me he could hear it. I very slowly reached out my hand and took the device. My pale face was reflected in the dark screen. I had tried many times to remember how he unlocked it in front of me. David was one of those men who are cautious with money, but careless with the feelings of others. He didn't think his wife would ever secretly look into his phone. Just as he didn't think I would check the statements or record a conversation with his mother on a dictaphone. Probably. That's why he hadn't changed the passcode for several years. I punched in our daughter's birthday, month, day, year. The screen unlocked. At that, a moment, an icy cold ran down my back. I went out with the phone into the living room, sat in the corner of the sofa, and quickly opened messages. First thing I found was the text thread with Mom. It was so long that just a sight of it made it hurt. Mostly they were voice memos, but there was quite a lot of text clearly visible on the screen. You must close the deal on this apartment while she suspects nothing. If she demands to be written in as an owner, say the bank won't approve the loan modification. If necessary, I'll talk to Vincent from the law firm. Don't be soft with her. The more you indulge a woman, the more brazen she becomes. I gripped the phone tightly. Every line was like the snap of scissors cutting the day off the last remnants of my illusions. But the saddest thing was not Gloria's insidious nature, but how David answered her. Not with objections, not refusals, but only phrases like, "I understood. Let me find the right time." She's still, doubting. "I'll come up with something." I scrolled up the correspondence. The more I read, the tighter my chest compressed. Even half a year ago, Gloria began mentioning the money my uncle gave me. She holds on to that money too tightly. You must somehow find out exactly how much she has in the account. As soon as we buy the apartment, we'll deal with that money too. In one message, David wrote, "What if she doesn't want to sign?" Gloria replied instantly, "If she doesn't want to, we'll force her. With a small child, she won't go far." I read this, and my hands shook. It turned out that in their eyes, the child I gave birth to and raised every day was just an anchor to keep me. They were sure that for the sake of the child I would endure everything, that for her sake I would close my eyes and sign everything they slipped me. This confidence did not arise from scratch. It grew on the soil of my long-term silence, my striving for peace, my fear of scandals. I opened other apps. In David's email, there was a forwarded letter from an unfamiliar address with the subject, "Sample documents for real estate transaction." Attached inside was a file. I opened it, and my heart stopped. It was a draft of a post-nuptial agreement aimed at separating assets and a sample, quitclaim deed, waiving marital rights to property acquired after a certain date. The text was full of legalese, but I didn't need to read everything to understand the essence. If I signed this, the apartment, even bought with my money, would legally have no relation to me whatsoever. I quickly took screenshots of every page and emailed them to myself on my secure account. Then I continued searching. Besides correspondence with his mother, one name made me freeze. Michelle. At first, I thought it was a colleague, but opening the chat, I felt blood rush to my head. The correspondence began more than 10 months ago. At first, the tone was restrained, but over time became so intimate it couldn't be interpreted otherwise. "Did you eat already? I'm so tired today. Wish I could see you. It's so stuffy at home." From that side, they answered, "Don't think about bad things. When will you finally talk to your wife? I don't want to be in this position forever." I sat motionless. I was ready for deception, with money, with documents, for betrayal of trust. But the appearance of another woman was like a hammer blow to the chest. I scrolled further, message after message. They met in cafes, once in a restaurant by the lake, another time at a hotel. A short message. I arrived. Come up. The messages weren't overtly explicit, but there were enough of them for any wife to understand everything. In one recent exchange, Michelle wrote, "When it's all over, what will you do?" David replied, "First, let's deal with the apartment." Right under this was her message. "Your mom said for me not to worry." My eyes went dark. Your mom said for me not to worry. This meant that Gloria knew. Not just knew, but perhaps was involved in this affair herself. Maybe she saw in this another card to play, another path of retreat for her son after he received the apartment and money. I sat huddled on the sofa with the cold phone in my hands. Inside was a frightening void. The pain was no longer acute, tearing. There was a sensation, as if looking at a house long eaten by termites, and only today, touching it, You see how rotten boards crumble one after another? I don't know how long I sat like that. Only when it started getting light, outside the window, and the noise of a garbage truck was heard, did I wake up and look at the time. Almost 5 a.m. I quickly photographed all necessary correspondence, sent it to email, saved the attached folder on my phone, and then deleted traces from the temporary email box. Before putting the phone back, I looked one more time at the locked screen. Our daughter's birthday was still there, like a bitter mockery. Some people can use their child's name and date of birth as a password, but completely misunderstand what it means to be a father. That morning I got up early as usual to make breakfast. David woke up a little later. He came out of the bedroom with a pale, sleep-deprived face. I put a bowl of oatmeal on the table and calmly said, "Eat, or you'll be late." He watched me, trying to guess if something had changed in me. He couldn't even imagine that in just one night, I saw almost all the dirty truth that he had hidden behind my back for so long. While he ate, his phone vibrated. A message lit up on the screen, and I glimpsed the name Michelle. David hastily turned the phone over. The movement was quick, but for me more than sufficient. "Why don't you look?" I asked. "Work stuff," he answered immediately. I didn't look up, putting more oatmeal for Lily. "Ah, I see." Never had two short words confused him more than any scandal. He ate quickly, went to get dressed. Before leaving, he turned around and said, "This evening, Mom wants to come over to clarify everything. You just don't get nervous, okay?" I looked at him and barely noticeably smiled. Let her come. When the door closed behind him, I sat for a little longer, then called Olivia. Hearing my voice, she asked immediately, "Are you okay?" I answered very slowly. I looked through David's phone, and I have everything. Correspondence with his mother, draft waiver of property, rights, and texts with a mistress. Olivia fell silent for a few seconds. "You're serious?" "Yes, I'm coming over right now." I wanted to refuse, but a lump rose in my throat. After a night resembling wandering through a swamp, one phrase, "I'm coming over right now," made my eyes fill with warmth. Around 9 o'clock, Olivia arrived. I showed her all the screenshots, all the texts, all attached files. Olivia finished reading, and her face turned pale. "What scumbags?" I sat opposite, clutching a glass of long-cooled water in my hands. "What do I do now?" Olivia thought a little and said, "First, make backup copies of everything, not in one place. Print it out, put it on a thumb drive. Second, immediately look for a lawyer. Don't wait any longer. I don't want to raise a fuss yet." It's not raising a fuss, it's protecting yourself. The longer you drag it out, the more time they will have to cover their tracks. I was silent. Olivia took my hand. "Sarah, listen to me. This is no longer just a family quarrel. This is a planned operation. Money, apartment, papers, even a mistress. Everything is ready. If you show softness now, you're finished." I looked up at my friend. From the depths of my soul, a very strange feeling rose. It was no longer just pain, and not quite hatred. It was cold, sharp, determination. "Good," I said. "This afternoon I will go to a lawyer." At that moment my phone rang. Gloria. I looked at her name, and the corners of my lips slightly turned up themselves. I knew that tonight a new spectacle would begin. And this time, I wouldn't be the one who silently allows herself to be led by the nose. I looked at the illuminated screen with Gloria's name and was in no hurry to Answer: Olivia, sitting opposite, still with eyes red from anger on my behalf, quietly asked, "Gonna answer?" I nodded, picked up the phone, and turned on speaker. The sharp but deliberately restrained voice of my mother-in-law immediately rang out on the other end. "Sarah, will you be home this afternoon? I want to come talk candidly. All misunderstandings need to be resolved. Otherwise, what is this husband and wife? Like knives drawn, neighbors will laugh." I exchanged glances with Olivia and calmly answered, "I will be home. Come over. David will return early too. If anything, as they say, we'll discuss everything." In the family circle. Hearing the words family circle, I felt inner cold. But my voice remained, "Avon, good." Hanging up, Olivia leaned her hands on the table and hissed through her teeth. Classic. First they crap all over everything, then call for resolving everything in the family circle. I said nothing. Probably after the night when I learned too much, my emotions were no longer so turbulent. They transitioned into another state, heavier, harder, like a shard of glass stuck under the skin. It no longer bleeds, but at the slightest touch causes acute pain to the marrow. Olivia stayed with me almost until noon. Before leaving, she helped me once, again, make backup copies of everything. Besides personal email, we copied screenshots, statements, files, and audio recordings onto a small flash drive. Olivia insisted that I photograph all documents regarding the money from my uncle, from wire transfer receipts to old messages between us. "The more complete, the better," she instructed. "Don't think you'll remember everything. When a person is cornered, they easily get lost." I nodded. In the afternoon, having picked Lily up from daycare and put her down for a nap, I changed clothes, took the folder with documents, and drove to the lawyer. The office was located in a small building downtown. The attorney I came to was named Ann Davis. Olivia recommended her. She was in her 40s, spoke clearly, and her gaze read the sobriety of a person who had solved hundreds of family problems. Hearing my story from beginning to end, she never interrupted me once. Only when I finished did she ask, "Do you have proof with you?" I put the folder on the table and began taking everything out in order. The joint account statement, screenshots of David's correspondence with his mother, the draft waiver of property rights, screenshots of David's correspondence with the woman named Michelle, and the audio recording I made that day in the apartment. Ann Davis studied everything very carefully. The longer she looked, the more serious her face became. After some time, she looked up at me. "You did the right thing by not revealing all your cards at once. Is this enough?" I asked. "For a wife who wants to protect herself, more than enough. But if we are talking about a long-term perspective, for example, division of property or divorce, you need to prepare even better." The word divorce, pronounced by her, made my heart shrink. Although I thought about it, although I knew that this marriage was rotten to the core, hearing it from another person was still painful. Ann Davis, as if understanding my thoughts, said, "I'm not saying you need to divorce right now. I say you need to be ready for the worst-case scenario. Women often hope, delay, but delaying without having protection means voluntarily putting yourself in a losing position." I lowered my head, running a finger along the edge of the statement. "What do you think they might do next?" Ann Davis thought for a few seconds. "First, they will continue to exert psychological pressure on you so that you soften. Second, they will try to slip you papers under some plausible pretext. Third, if they understand that you can no longer be deceived, They may start pressuring through the child or appealing to family values. I sharply raised my head. Through the child? Yes. People who do not respect others' boundaries very easily use children as leverage. It's not always real blackmail. It's enough just to threaten or create a feeling that if you resist, your child will suffer. Every word of hers was like a nail, because that is exactly what Gloria and David had written about. With a small child, she won't go far. I clenched my fists. Ann Davis continued. From this moment, you must do 3 things. First, keep all original personal documents and child's documents in a secure place outside the home. Second, completely separate personal and joint finances. Third, under no circumstances sign any documents without showing them to me. I immediately nodded. The correspondence about infidelity has value as proof that marital life cracked and that the other side was not honest. But the most important thing for you right now is money and documents. I sat in the lawyer's office for almost another hour. Before leaving, Ann Davis gave me her personal business card with a mobile phone number on the back. If tonight they arrive and something goes wrong, call. I took the card and suddenly felt a little lighter in my soul. Not because the problems decreased, but because I finally wasn't completely alone in this chaos. In the evening, the weather in Charlotte softened. A wind from the river brought a slight humid coolness into the open window. I cooked dinner, bathed Lily, gathered my hair in a ponytail, and sat waiting in the living room. Strangely enough, I was absolutely calm. Probably over the last day, I heard so much truth, saw so many papers, that initial fear lost its outlines. It turned into alertness. At 7:15, the doorbell rang. I opened it. First entered Gloria with a bag of groceries in her hands and with the facial expression of a martyr having to save a family on the verge of collapse. Behind her walked David with a face heavy as stone. Barely sitting on the sofa, she began. I bought some organic grapes for my granddaughter. Let the child eat healthy. I poured water into 3 glasses and placed them on the table. Thanks. She surveyed the room and sighed. Sarah, I thought a lot these last days. The family had peace and quiet. And now, because of some misunderstanding with money, everything has gone awry. How sad. I sat with a straight back, hands on my knees. If this is a misunderstanding, all the more reason to clarify everything. She immediately nodded. Correct. Clarify. I want that too. And she turned to David. Speak. David was silent, then began. I was wrong to transfer money to Mom without telling you. I watched him. This was perhaps the first articulate apology since everything came out. But I no longer believed words. But I assure you, I had no intention to harm you, he continued. Gloria immediately intervened. Of course, David and I, just as close kin, wanted to do everything without unnecessary hassles. What mother-in-law wishes evil to her daughter-in-law? I didn't answer immediately. I let this silence last a few seconds, then asked, then what about the draft quitclaim deed waiving marital property rights? The room immediately plunged into silence. Gloria blinked. What deed? I turned to David. You didn't tell Mom? David turned pale. I immediately understood. He didn't expect that I saw that. File, Gloria babbled. Sarah, I don't understand what you're talking about. I looked her straight in the eyes. If you don't understand, I will explain. That day in the apartment, you told David to slip me papers for signature, promising to add me to the documents later. And after that, a draft of a postnup and a waiver regarding that condo appeared in David's email. Clear enough. Gloria? Gloria turned sharply to David. Son, David immediately interrupted her. You looked at my phone without permission. I laughed. A short but sharp laugh. You betray me, hide money, plot schemes, and then ask why I looked at your phone? Gloria raised her voice. David, look, is this how wives act? Digging into husbands' phones? It's simply outrageous. I turned to her. And I want to ask you, Gloria, is this how mothers-in-law act, teaching a son to deceive his wife with money, slip her papers, and at the places slip, same time, consider themselves right? She slammed her hand on the table. Speak politely. I am speaking very politely. Politely? While attacking your husband's family? I looked at her, pronouncing every word clearly. My husband's family is jointly plotting against my financial assets. I am not attacking anyone. I am just defending myself. Gloria choked with indignation, and then unexpectedly changed tactics. Her eyes filled with tears. Sarah, I know you're angry, but I'm old already. Maybe I didn't think something through. I just worried so that David would have his own home, so that if, God forbid, something happens, he has somewhere to live. A man needs his own foundation. He won't live forever on his wife's territory, on birds' rights. These words pierced me with cold to the very heart. It turns out, in her head, from the very beginning, to form bind. I wasn't someone building a joint home with. I was just a wallet that needed to be opened in time. And what about me? I asked. If, God forbid, something happens, where will I? And my daughter live? She fell silent. David intervened. His voice was already cracking. Enough, Sarah. Mom didn't mean she wants to throw you out on the street. I looked at him. Then, what do the messages from Michelle mean? The air in the room seemed to compress. David froze. Gloria stared bug-eyed at her son. I realized she knew about the other woman, but most likely didn't know that I also knew about it. You've lost your mind. David jumped up. I also stood up, but my voice remained low. Have I lost my mind? Or are you terrified? He was breathing heavily. His face turned crimson. Gloria immediately rushed to defend. Men communicate with different people at work. Why are you exaggerating everything so much? What will you achieve by this? I looked at her and suddenly felt more laughter than anger. Even the fact that her son cheats, she could present so easily. I answered slowly, what will I achieve? I will see what you are really like. As soon as I said this, I saw David clench his fists, and at that moment, I realized that tonight would not end just with talk. David's fists were clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. I clearly saw anger distorting his face, flaring nostrils, clenched jaw, bloodshot eyes, ready to explode. In 5 years of marriage, I had seen him irritated, angry, seen him evade answers, but I had never seen him so cornered. And it was understandable. People panic only when everything they hid is suddenly dragged into the light. Gloria spoke first. Sarah, don't talk nonsense. Men work, communicate with someone, text. It's normal. If you make such a scandal over everything, no, family will withstand it. I looked at her, and inside everything became absolutely calm. A mother who can defend her son to such an extent that she considers his infidelity normal is capable of justifying anything. And what, in your opinion, is abnormal? I asked. She stumbled for a second, then shrieked, "You talk like that to elders." I am speaking very clearly. Clearly? Family affairs which are resolved behind closed doors, you drag out and interrogate like an investigator. Aren't you ashamed? I smirked. Shame shouldn't be mine. David stepped forward. His voice grew hoarse. Enough, Sarah. I turned to him. Where exactly is enough? Where you transferred money from? Our joint account to your mother? Where you two planned to deceive me with? Documents? Or where you met with another woman while playing the role of good husband and father at home? Every word of mine heated the already tense atmosphere even more. Lily, hearing loud voices, peeked out of her room and quietly called, "Mommy?" I immediately turned around and softened my voice. "Go play with Teddy, sweetie. Mommy will finish soon." The girl looked at me, then at grandmother and dad with frightened round eyes. She was too small to understand why the adults sitting in one room suddenly became such strangers to each other. David ran a hand through his hair, paced the room, and then sharply turned. "Good. You want to talk frankly? Let's talk." I didn't answer. He grinned, maliciously with the laugh of a man who could no longer save face. "Yes, I texted with Michelle. And you know why? Because I'm tired of this life. Every day. Returning home, I saw only your sour face. The child is always with you. The atmosphere in the house is like at a funeral. It was suffocating me. I stood motionless, listening to his words as if it were a story about someone else. Suffocating? Yes, you are always right. You always silently suffer, portraying yourself as good, offended. But you know, this silence of yours tires more than any scandal. I looked at him, and for the first time felt how alien and petty this man was. That is, you cheated because I was silent. I didn't say that, but you accuse me. Gloria immediately intervened. Her voice was sharp as a knife. And he is telling the truth. If a woman doesn't know how to keep a husband, is always cold as an icicle, why be surprised that a man gets bored? Besides, ungrateful too, always thinking only of herself. I sharply turned to her. What else to think about myself? Since you came into this house, you always defend only yours. You kept the money from Uncle for yourself. Decide everything your way. Once married, you should think about your husband, about his family. I laughed. This time, even to me, my own laugh seemed bitter. I didn't think enough about your family, Gloria. 5 years of living expenses. Daughters, tuition, medicine, holiday gifts, did I not contribute? When last time you lay in the hospital, who spent several nights there in a row, did you forget? Gloria averted her eyes and said sharply, "It is your duty." Does that mean my money is also my duty? To give to you, you talk like you're selfish. I sighed deeply. If it weren't for Lily in the next room, I probably would have cried or screamed. But strangely, looking at her, I felt only growing determination. Selfishness is taking others' money and calling it a family matter. Selfishness is inventing how to deceive a person with documents and saying it's for the sake of the future. Selfishness is knowing that your son cheats and at the same time accusing the wife that she didn't keep the husband. David slapped the armrest of the chair hard. "Sarah, stop it. I haven't finished. Yet." I stepped forward and looked him straight in the eyes. Listen carefully. From the very beginning, I took nothing that by right belonged to you, and you are the opposite. You hid money, hid mother, hid plans, hid a mistress. You used the plans, concept of family to bind me, while you yourself first destroyed this family. David exhaled heavily. His look expressed both powerlessness and hatred. What do you want? I want the truth, I answered. And I want for all this to end. Gloria jumped up. What end? At the drop of a hat threatening divorce. Immediately, I turned to her. At the drop of a hat? Money is redeemable business. In a family, everything is joint. And if a man on the side made a mistake, he needs to and be instructed on the true path, who in life doesn't have mistakes. I looked at her, and the last remnants of my patience ran out. I have no desire to raise someone else's husband. She stared bug-eyed. Whom did you call someone else's husband? I looked directly at David. A man who, together with his mother, plots against his wife and then starts a relationship on the side, has long ceased to be my calm husband. Heavy silence hung in the room. David looked at me as if he didn't believe I could say that. Probably he thought that I would always be softer, more compliant, that even knowing every Yossi, he didn't think I would say such decisive words. Lily again walked out of the room, hugging the bear, and pressed herself to the wall. Mommy! Grandma is yelling so loud. My heart shrunk. I quickly went over and hugged her. It's okay. I'm here. She buried her face in my neck and whispered. Just 2 words, but they turned all my anger into cold determination. I could endure anything, but my child didn't deserve to grow up in such an atmosphere. She didn't deserve to hear grandmother justifying betrayal, didn't deserve to see parents look at each other as enemies. I led her into the room, closed the door, sat on the edge of the bed and hugged her. She was still trembling. Her small hand clutched my shoulder. Mommy, don't leave. Okay. I kissed her forehead. I won't leave. I'm here. Putting her to bed, I stood for a few seconds in the middle of the small room full of toys and books. A 4-year-old child needs a calm home, and this home had long rotted so much it was ready to collapse from the slightest breath of wind. When I returned to the living room, Gloria was still sitting there with a discontented face, and David stood by the window, smoking. He rarely smoked at home, which meant he really was in turmoil. I walked straight to the desk, unlocked my bag, and took out a stack of prepared documents. What are you doing? Asked David. I laid out the sheets on the table. This is the statement from our joint account. These are screenshots of your correspondence with Mom. This is the draft of the quitclaim deed. I looked up. My voice was so calm, I surprised myself. I copied everything. David's face turned white. Gloria looked at the stack of papers. Her lips trembled. What do you intend to do? From tomorrow, all our financial affairs will be separate. I will also move my personal documents and child's documents to another location. David walked closer. His voice became hard. Sarah, don't go too far. Far? I looked at him. You went far first. I told you. With Michelle, everything is not like you think. And how is it? He went numb. I don't need explanations anymore. I continued. I'm just informing. Gloria at that moment got truly scared. She changed tone from tough to pleading. Sarah, don't blow up a scandal. I beg you, for the sake of the granddaughter, for the sake of the family. I looked at her for a long time. How strange. The woman who humiliated me for 5 years now so easily pronounces the word beg. But she begged not for me, and not because she realized her guilt. She just was afraid of losing control. If you really thought about your granddaughter, you wouldn't write that with a small child. She won't go far. She froze. It was a phrase from their correspondence. This meant I knew not a part, but almost everything. David sharply turned to his mother with panic in his eyes. I understood that now, even between them, there was no room left for pretensi. Gloria babbled. I just said it in the heat of the moment. Your heat of the moment has lasted for more than half a year. I gathered the documents and put them in the folder. I say one last time. From this moment, any documents concerning money, house, child, I will handle through my lawyer. David froze. Lawyer? Yes. Gloria jumped up. Have you gone crazy? To hire lawyers over trifles in the phi blank family. I looked at her. With people who cover their greed with talk about family, I am forced to speak the language of documents. Outside the window, a strong wind suddenly blew. The curtain flapped and fell. At that moment, I distinctly understood that this house was no longer a place worth holding on to. It is simply a place where I must withstand the last battle and leave. David looked at me with bloodshot eyes. If you want it that way, then don't complain later. I nodded. These words you should say to yourself. That night, after Gloria and David left the living room, leaving behind thick silence, I understood that everything had collapsed finally, but I also understood something else. The real battle is just beginning, and tomorrow I will have to take the first step to lead this marriage out of the shadows. In that night, after Gloria and David left, such silence settled in the apartment that I heard the wall clock ticking. I sat on the sofa for a long time, not turning on the big light, only the dim yellow light from the floor lamp in the C's corner. In this weak light, everything familiar around suddenly became alien. The sofa I once chose, the curtains I washed and hung myself, daughter's small bookshelf, the pot with the snake plant on the windowsill. Everything was in its place, but the feeling of home was no more. A house under the floor of which lies deception, betrayal, and greed. However whole it may seem, it is just an empty shell. I stood up, checked the front door, threw the deadbolt, and went into my deadbolt, daughter's room. She had long been fast asleep, hugging the plush bear with one arm. Her eyelids were slightly swollen from tears. I sat on the edge of the bed, stroked her hair, and inside everything compressed with pain. Adults can choose the wrong person, the wrong marriage, the wrong faith, but children cannot. They are born without choosing parents, without choosing whether they live in a calm family or a rotten one. I looked at her for a long time and vowed to myself that whatever it cost me, I would not allow her to become a bargaining chip in the games of adults. Around 11 p.m. my phone vibrated. A message from David. Don't exaggerate. Tomorrow I'll take a day off. We'll talk privately. I looked at the screen and extinguished it without answering. A few minutes later came another one. Think again about the lawyer. Our family hasn't reached that point. I continued to be silent. In the third message, his tone changed. If you are stubborn, don't complain later. I looked at these words, and there was no drop of surprise in me anymore. The man who just tried to appear civilized, in just a few hours, showed his true face, full of threats and reproaches. It turned out, his softness never was strength of character. It was just a way of evasion for a person not daring to honestly look truth in the eye. The next morning I woke up very early. First thing, I opened the locked cabinet and gathered all important documents into a dense fabric bag. My passport, daughter's birth certificate, social security cards, marriage license, the copies I made, receipts for money transfers from uncle, bank statements, screenshots of correspondence, the flash drive with evidence, Ann Davis's all business card. I rechecked everything 3 times. Then I called Ann Davis and arranged a meeting for late morning. Taking Lily to daycare, I stopped by a locksmith shop and asked to change the lock on the file cabinet in the bedroom to something industrial grade. The locksmith looked at me with surprise when I asked for a more reliable lock. I just smiled and said, "There was a small child in the house. There are things that don't need explaining to outsiders. The main thing is that you yourself know why you are doing it." Around 10, I arrived at the lawyer's office. Understood that the evening was restless. Something happened. I sat down and put the bag with documents on the table. I told everything about the money, about the papers, about that woman. She looked at me. Their reaction. I retold everything. Gloria's behavior, David's evasions, and his last threat. She listened very attentively, not interrupting. When I finished, she said, slowly, "It means they realize that you are no longer in ignorance. From this moment, you need to be doubly careful. What should I do next?" Ann Davis leaned back in the chair. "There are 2 paths. First, you stay. There, maintain calm, collect new evidence, but risk encountering even greater pressure. Second, you immediately separate as a minimum financially and documentarily, and even consider temporary housing if you feel that the current situation is unsafe for you and the child." I froze. "Move right now? I don't have time to prepare." "No need to hurry, but you need to have a plan. Because people like your mother-in-law, when their plan to seize money and apartment fails, won't stop at tears." I remembered her yesterday's words, to hire lawyers over trifles in the Ron family. In her voice there was no repentance, only anger that the prey tore out of hands. Ann Davis continued, "You can file a petition for freezing marital assets in a case of dispute, but at this stage, it is more important to send them an official notice through a lawyer so that they know you have legal protection, and to stop any attempts to slip you traps for signature." I immediately nodded. "Can this be done right now?" "Yes." Right on the spot, I signed a retainer agreement, and she drafted a short letter of representation. It stated that from the present moment, all documents concerning property, loans, retitling, ownership rights, or financial confirmations between me and David must pass verification by my representative. She added one more clear phrase: "Any transactions using my client's separate property or joint marital assets without mutual written consent will be subject to legal challenge, including forensic accounting." I read every word and felt how something inside strengthened. For the first time since the beginning of this story, I had the feeling that I was not just taking blows, but building a shield. In the afternoon, when I returned home, David was already sitting in the living room. He really took a day off. He had dark circles under his eyes, stubble, his shirt was wrinkled. Probably he also spent a sleepless night, but his fatigue no longer evoked sympathy in me. There is fatigue, its own actions, and it cannot be used as an excuse for forgiveness. He saw the bag with documents in my hands, and his look immediately darkened. "Where were you?" I put the bag on the desk. "At the lawyer's." His face instantly changed. "You really did it? Did you think I was joking?" David stood up and walked closer. "Sarah, do you understand how far you are? Taking everything?" I took off my shoes and walked past him to the kitchen for water. My voice was calm. "I didn't take it. Everything went here itself from the moment you chose." "Lies." He stood in the kitchen doorway, blocking my path. I beg you, let's not drive. To this, I looked up at him. For the first time in many days, I saw in his look not only anger, but fear too. But he was afraid, not of losing me. He was afraid of losing control. I cannot escalate, I said. His eyes momentarily flashed with hope. But on one condition, you tell me the whole truth unreservedly. He looked at me for a long time. I understood that he is now calculating to what extent he can confess so that a path to retreat still remains. Finally, he sat at the table, clasping his hands. Michelle and I met at a corporate party. I stood leaning against the kitchen counter and listened. At first, we just chatted. Then she started writing a lot. And I was lonely at Brayson. Home then. I smirked. You again blame me. He closed his eyes for a moment. Yes, I am guilty. But I didn't intend to. Abandon wife and child. She knew you had a wife and child? Knew. She knew about the condo? He was silent. Knew? Repeated I. Knew? He replied quietly. How much did she know? David lowered his head. Mom met with her several times. Inside me, everything went cold. Although I guessed, hearing his confession was like a new cut. That is, your mom knew you were meeting? Yes. And supported it? He didn't answer. I see. He hurriedly raised his head. But the condo is a separate matter. It doesn't concern her. I looked at him, and I no longer had strength to be angry. I felt funny from this distorted division of boundaries. In his head, what wasn't a separate matter at all? My money, his mom knew. His mistress, his mom knew. The plan with the condo, his mom knew. Only I was the last to know about everything. David clutched the edge of the table. His voice became heavy. I told you. I will resolve everything. Break with her. Stop the story with the condo. The money mom took, I will settle. I looked at him. A month ago, I would, perhaps, have been touched by these words, but now no. Too late. And I clearly understood. People like David don't change because they realize their wrongness. They retreat only when the situation becomes unprofitable. I took the lawyer's notice from the bag and laid it before him. Today, my lawyer will send you an official copy via certified mail and email. He took it, began reading, and his face became more and more gray. You're serious? Yes, Sarah. You are not giving me a chance. I looked at him for a long time, then asked in response, and you? From moment you began transferring money to your mother? From the moment you listened to how she teaches you to deceive me with documents? From the moment you began meeting with another? Did you give me at least one chance to still believe you? He sat motionless. I took the glass with water, took a sip and pronounced what I thought about all last night. From this moment, you and I no longer speak in the Karasli language of trust, only in the language of evidence and responsibility. David looked up at me, his lips trembled. He wanted to say something, but at that moment, a loud knock on the door was heard. Bam, bam, bam. 3 loud knocks, frequent and unusual. David and I turned around simultaneously. My heart, for some reason, started beating faster. I had the feeling that the person behind the door would bring a new storm with them, even stronger than all previous ones. The knock on the door was repeated twice more, so strong that the door trembled slightly. David and I exchanged glances. Irritation and anxiety were read in his May eyes, and I, for some reason, had a very bad premonition. As if behind the door, waited not just a new showdown, but another prepared blow. David jumped up sharply. "Who is it now?" I didn't answer. I slowly walked to the door ahead of him. When I opened it, slightly, the first person I saw was Gloria. She stood right in front of me, with disheveled hair, tightly pressed lips, and behind her back was a man of about 40, in a white shirt with a briefcase under his arm, the look of a person used to dealing with papers. One look was enough for me to understand. This is that very Vincent from the law firm she wrote to David about. Gloria, barely seeing me, immediately tried to squeeze out. "Open up." Serious people came to talk. I continued holding the door, leaving only a narrow gap. "Talk about what?" The man behind her back smiled politely and nodded slightly. "Hello. I'm Vincent. I handle legal support for civil matters. Mrs. Patterson asked me to come to explain some procedural moments to your family to avoid misunderstandings." I looked him straight in the eyes. "I have my own lawyer." The smile on his face froze for a second, but immediately appeared again. "That is even better, but it is always more useful to talk in the family circle first." Gloria immediately chimed in. "See? The man is a professional, and you behave like everyone wants to offend you." Hearing this, I stepped out of the apartment and closed the door behind me so no one could look inside. I didn't want my daughter to see these faces. I repeat, again, all questions will be resolved through my lawyer. Gloria's face changed immediately. "Sarah, don't be impudent. Impudence is bringing outsiders into my house without my consent," I answered, calmly. The man named Vincent glanced at Gloria and then said in a softer tone, "It's not worth getting so nervous. I do not represent anyone's side. I just want to explain to you that in many cases, registering real estate in one person's name is a standard technical procedure. Later, adding a second owner will not be difficult." I stared at him. "Do you have some documents?" "Yes. I brought samples for review." With these words, he began opening his briefcase. I immediately stepped back a pace. "I will take nothing." David walked out of the apartment just at this moment. Seeing Vincent, he grew even gloomier. Probably, he didn't expect his mother to bring reinforcements so quickly. "Mom," I asked to wait. Gloria turned sharply to him. "Wait for what? Will you wait? She'll bring a real lawyer." And she turned to me again. Her voice became more and more sharp. "She exaggerates everything. I cannot allow this family to fall apart because of some stupid suspicions." Hearing the words "stupid suspicions," I felt more laughter than anger. The blank sasper in some mind. Evidence was on their face. But in her head, all this was just my fiction. And desire to make a scandal. I pronounced clearly, separating the words, "Don't call it suspicions. Money is transferred. Messages exist." I saw the draft documents too. From this moment, any attempts to slip me anything for signature bypassing my lawyer are meaningless. Vincent frowned slightly, apparently realizing the situation was not as simple as Gloria described. He cleared his throat. "Calm down. If you already have legal consultation, all the more reason not to be nervous. I just wanted to clarify that standard forms exist." "No need," I interrupted. "If you are truly a serious specialist, you must understand that coming to the house of a person who has a dispute and persuading them to sign some papers is unethical." This time, his face really changed. Seeing this, Gloria flared up. "She complicates everything. Explain to her." Vincent was silent for a few seconds, then closed the briefcase. I think today is an unsuitable moment. Gloria didn't let up, grabbing him by the arm. Speak. She understands nothing. I looked at this scene, and it became bitter in my mouth. They say greed deprives a person of all dignity. And this was truth. She reached the point of dragging an outsider to save her failing plan. And all this she called care for. The family. David walked over. His voice was low but sharp. Mom, leave. She turned sharply to him. Silence. If you were as tough as me, it wouldn't have come to this. This phrase echoed down the hallway, and doors of neighboring apartments began to open slightly. I heard shuffling of slippers. Someone peeked out. Honor, private life, tranquility, everything she always reproached me with and forced me to be silent. Now she herself threw out for public view. If you don't leave, I will call security, I said. Gloria stared bug-eyed. You dare? I dare. My voice wasn't loud, but there was so much cold in it that I myself realized how much I had changed. Before, if she made a scandal in the hallway, I would have panicked, fearing condemnation of neighbors. But now, most of all, I was afraid not of others' glances, but that if I retreated one more step, they, with son, would sit on my neck all life. Vincent, apparently, understood that the situation got out of control, and hurriedly said, Okay, Mrs. Patterson, let's do this another time. And he turned to me, trying to preserve politeness. Excuse the bother. I didn't answer. I just looked at him until he turned and went to the elevator. Gloria still stood by the door. Her eyes burned with anger. David had to take her hand. Mom, let's go. She pulled away her hand. Her voice broke, warmed a snake on the chest, and she poked a finger in my direction. Don't think that with some pieces of paper, you'll scare me. In this house, it's not for you to decide what to do. I looked at her very slowly, very distinctly. If in this house there is still something to save, it is only because I still stand here and talk. You should remember this, possibly because of these words, or maybe because neighboring doors opened even wider. She finally turned and went. But before entering the elevator, she turned around and hissed through her teeth. You will regret it. Elevator doors closed in front of her face, distorted with anger. The corridor emptied. Neighboring doors quietly closed. I turned to enter the house and suddenly heard a dull thud behind my back. David hit the wall hard with his fist. Knuckles of his fingers were covered with blood. I froze. He stood breathing heavily. His gaze was full of both anger and humiliation. Now you are satisfied? I looked at his hand, then in his eyes. Today, not I disgraced myself because of you. He grinned maliciously. You brought everything to such a state that it's no longer a family. I closed the door, locked the deadbolt, and only then turned. Family? You still remember this word? David froze. Probably he understood that after this scene we had no masks left. My daughter ran out of the room with a pale face. Mommy, who was shouting, There? I hastily squatted and hugged her. It's okay. Everything is over. She looked at her father and pressed closer to me. This small reflex pierced my heart with pain. Children are very sensitive. They might not understand the words betrayal, money, dispute, but they understand who makes them feel danger. That evening, I didn't allow David to take daughter anywhere. He sat in the port-in-the-blank corner of the living room with a hand wrapped in a napkin, silent as a mute. I knew that chaos was in his head. His mother just blew everything up. That, Vincent, if he has at least a drop of professional pride, will no longer want to get involved in this. And I turned from a passive victim into an active player. This must have, for the first time, made him truly scared. Around 5 p.m., Ann Davis called me. I sent notice to your husband by email and certified courier. I went out onto the balcony to hear better. Yes. Are you okay? I looked at the courtyard below. Evening sun faded on tree crowns. Today, his mother brought a person right home with some papers. Did you take anything? No, I didn't take anything. Well done. From this moment, be even more careful. If they are in a hurry, they can change tactics. I was silent for a few seconds, then asked, how change? Ann Davis answered very shortly, strike at the child. I clenched the phone, harder. In the evening, David didn't eat dinner. He sat on the balcony, smoking one cigarette after another. I fed Lily, bathed her, put her to bed. Around 10, when I came out of her room, David stood in the doorway. Sarah, let's talk one. Last time, I was so tired that I didn't even ask about what. I just nodded. He looked at me for a long time, then said, if you decided so, I won't hold you. But daughter is mine. Don't even think that you can take her for yourself. A lump rose in my throat. Are you threatening me? I'm just reminding you that not everything is in your hands. These words pierced me with icy cold. I heard Ann Davis's warning during the prose day, and in the evening, David himself embodied this fear into reality. I looked at him and slowly pronounced, if you dare to use the child to pressure me, I won't leave it like that. He didn't answer, just turned away and left. I remained alone in the middle of the living room, feeling a cold wind rushing through my chest. For the first time since the beginning of this story, I got truly scared. Not of losing husband, not of neighbors' condemnation, but of what they, with his mother, could do, desperate with my only child. And at that moment, I understood what I must do next. Tomorrow, I must take daughter away from them. The next morning I woke up when outside the window it was still gray. The whole apartment was plunged into dense silence after a night when no one really slept. I lay and listened to the quiet humming of the refrigerator, the even breathing of daughter nearby, and the beating of my own heart in my chest. From the moment David threw the phrase, don't even think that you can take her for yourself, I had only one thought in my head. I cannot leave the child in such a suspended state for even one more day. I quietly sat up, adjusted the blanket on daughter, and went out into the living room to call Olivia. It was a little past 5 a.m. I thought she wouldn't pick up the phone yet. But after the second ring, Olivia answered. Olivia, I need your help. My voice was husky, probably because I couldn't swallow saliva all night. Silence hung on the other end of the wire for a second, and then Olivia immediately asked, what happened? I must take Lily from the house today. Olivia didn't ask questions. Come to me. I'm home. Come here first. Just from these words, my eyes stung. Sometimes one person ready to open the door to you means more than all the words of consolation in the world. I hung up and went to dress daughter. She was still sleepy, rubbed her little eyes, and asked, Mommy, where are we going so early? We are going to visit Aunt Olivia. I stroked her hair. Will Masha be there? She will. She immediately smiled, completely unsuspecting that for me today's trip was like a tactical retreat from the battlefield. I quickly dressed, gathered the bag with documents, several sets of clothes for daughter, children's Tylenol, juice boxes, toothbrush, towel, and her favorite, pink bear, she slept with every night. I tried not to take much, afraid of waking David. But as soon as I zipped up the bag, the bedroom door opened. In the opening stood David with disheveled hair, red eyes sunken from insomnia. "What are you doing?" I didn't flinch. Probably from last evening I was ready for this moment. "I'm taking daughter to a friend." He quickly walked over. "What friend?" "To Olivia." "Why?" I pulled daughter to me. To be in silence for a few days. David looked at the bag on the bed, and his face immediately darkened. "You really intend to take her away?" "I won't leave the child here at such a time. This is her home, a home where they constantly threaten, arrange scandals in the hallway, bring outsiders to the door. For me is no longer a safe place for a child." My voice wasn't loud, but there was so much steel in it that even he froze. David took a deep breath. "Sarah, don't dramatize." I looked him straight in the eyes. "Not I dramatize. You and your mother have long brought everything to the extreme." Daughter, feeling tension, clutched my hand. David looked at her and apparently understood that he couldn't make a scene in front of the child. He lowered his voice. "Want to take her? Take her. But in the evening, bring her back." "Not sure, Sarah." This time, metal sounded in his voice. I picked up the bag, picked up daughter with one arm, and clearly pronounced, "Listen carefully. I am not forbidding you to see daughter. But from this moment, nothing concerning her. Will you decide alone?" Anger flashed in David's eyes. "You deprive me of paternal rights." I looked at him, and no drop of softness remained in me. "No, you deprive yourself of them." Saying this, I went straight to the exit. David walked behind me to the living room, his hands now clenched into fists, now unclenched. Probably, he really wanted to stop me, but daughter was in my arms, and he dared not do anything harsh. Only when I opened the door did he shout in pursuit, "Sarah, don't force me." I turned around and looked at him for the last time before leaving. These words, you should say to your mother. The morning street was still empty. I walked with daughter in arms and bag over shoulder, quickly left the courtyard and caught a rideshare. Only when the car started moving did I feel that my palms were damp. Daughter sat nearby, hugging. The bear looked out the window with interest, pointed at a bakery and asked me a bunch of questions. And I, without stopping, looked at the phone. As expected, not even 10 minutes passed before David called. I rejected. He called again. I rejected again. After the fourth call, I sent him a short message. When daughter settles down, I will write. Not even half a minute passed before Gloria called. Seeing her name, I felt a chill run down my body. I didn't answer, but she began bombarding me with message. "Where did you take my granddaughter, Sarah? Don't be foolish. If I find out where you are hiding the granddaughter, blame yourself." The last message made my hands shake. Not out of fear for myself, but because I realized. From this moment, everything moved to a new level. These were no longer verbal skirmishes, not persuasions and not vague threats. They began to openly lay claim to the child. Arriving at Olivia's, barely stepping over the threshold, I could finally exhale, the air stuck in my chest. Olivia hugged me by the shoulders, led daughter inside, gave her cookies with milk, and led her to play with Masha. Watching the children quickly find common ground, I felt a stinging in my eyes. I turned away. so Olivia wouldn't see that I was about to burst into tears, but she noticed anyway. She sat me at the table, poured a glass of warm water. Cry if you want. Cannot. Shook my head, and it was true. I couldn't cry. Inside me there was only tension, as if someone dried all tears and replaced them with a layer of ice. I showed Olivia the message from Gloria. Olivia read it and pursed her lips. This one went completely off the rails. What should I do? Asked I. Immediately call the lawyer. I nodded. Ann Davis answered quickly. I told her that in the morning I took daughter away. About David's calls. About Gloria's threats. She was silent for a few seconds and then said, You did right. But from this moment, do not walk with the child alone in deserted places and save all messages. What if they come to daycare and take her earlier? You must immediately notify the director, the lead teacher, and security staff. Clearly state that from this day, only the mother or a person authorized by her can pick up the child. Do this in writing and preferably receive confirmation. Hearing this, I immediately called the daycare director. Fortunately, she treated it with understanding. I briefly explained that complexities arose in duplication, the family, and asked from today to give the child only to me or Olivia and to no one else, including grandmother or father without my direct confirmation. The director was a little surprised, but agreed, asking for an email confirmation. Barely hanging up, phone vibrated again. Message from David. Don't involve the child. I looked at these words and almost laughed. The first ones who decided to use the child as leverage were they with his mother. And now he accused me. I replied, You involved the child first. For a long time he didn't answer, but closer to noon I received a call from an unfamiliar number. I picked up the receiver. A male voice of middle years rang out, Sarah, this is Uncle Ted, David's father's cousin. I froze for a second. Uncle Ted was a distant relative we saw rarely on holidays, and he always seemed a restrained person. Yes, I'm listening to you, he sighed. His mother just called me, told everything. Whatever happens, husband and wife should resolve problems at home, not grab the child and run away. Pity the girl. I gripped the phone tightly. Means Gloria not only made a scandal at my home, but began calling all relatives. I tried to speak as calmly as possible. Uncle Ted, I didn't run away. I just took daughter to a friend for a few days, so it would be calmer. But a woman shouldn't be so hot-tempered. It won't lead to good. I clenched my teeth. I understand. But there are things which are no longer just temper. Uncle Ted, apparently, wanted to say something else, but I apologized and hung up, citing busyness. Putting down the phone, I felt heavy in my soul. This tactic, make a scandal to involve relatives and force the woman to return and endure, was too familiar to me. Before I was afraid of this. Now I felt only fatigue and disgust. In the afternoon, Olivia drove me to the daycare to pick up daughter earlier than usual. I wanted to make sure she was safe. As soon as we approached the gate, the director, seeing me from afar, quickly walked to meet. She had a strange expression on her face. Sarah, good thing you came. My heart went to my heels. Did something happen? She lowered her voice. An hour ago, an elderly woman came, said she is the girl's grandmother, and wanted to pick her up earlier. I froze on the spot. I said I need to call Mom and receive confirmation. She was very dissatisfied, said it's her granddaughter, and she needs no one's permission. But I didn't give the child. I felt blood congeal in my veins. Gloria really did it. Faster than I thought. Harder than I thought. I turned to Olivia. She too turned pale. The director didn't have time to finish speaking, as my phone vibrated. Message from Gloria. You have no right to treat granddaughter like this. I won't leave it like this. I looked at these words, and my fingers turned cold. I understood that from today, this is no longer family pressure. They really began the fight for the prom's child. I stood at the daycare gate, still clutching the phone so hard my fingers hurt. The message from Gloria was like a black ink stain, quickly spreading in my Compson 10 stain and head. You have no right to treat granddaughter like this. I won't leave it like this. Only yesterday, she sat in my living room, sobbing and hiding behind family to pressure me. And today, she came directly to the daycare to her granddaughter to take her. If the director hadn't been vigilant, if I hadn't managed to warn, I'm afraid to imagine what could have happened. The director, seeing my condition, lowered her voice. Sarah, if you have problems in the family, you better write an official statement for the daycare. Today I could hold the situation because I remembered your call. But if there is another shift or someone starts pressuring strongly, difficulties may arise. I immediately nodded. Yes, I will send you the statement today. My daughter at this time stood in the group, saw me, and with a joyful cry rushed to meet. Mommy! I hugged her, feeling simultaneously relief and acute pain. She knew only that Mommy came for her earlier and didn't suspect that just an hour ago, her grandmother stood right here, ready to take her away like a thing, to which she has a right. On the way to Olivia's, I sat in the back, hugging daughter and unblinkingly looked at passing streets. Olivia drove slower than usual, from time to time, casting glances at me. You will have to act tougher, she said. I know, I quietly answered. In the evening, feeding children and seating them to play, I called Ann Davis. Hearing my story, her voice immediately became hard. Listen to me. First, immediately save this message with the threat. Second, draft an official, notarized letter to the daycare with your signature and copy of ID where it will be clearly stated that you trust picking up the child only to authorized persons. Third, begin preparing documents in case you have to apply to court for temporary custody. Maybe I should contact the police? Asked I. Not for initiating a criminal case yet, but you can file a report to fix the brain fact, especially considering that relatives on husband's side already tried to self-willedly take the child from the institution. The sooner, the better. I wrote down every word in a notepad. She added that from this moment, all calls from husband and mother-in-law, if possible, need to be recorded. Do not enter into skirmishes with them. Just let them speak out and hang up. I sat for a long time at the table, in front of a clean sheet of paper. Olivia sat nearby, helping me draft the statement to daycare, and quietly cursed for me. This one completely lost the shores. I didn't answer not because I wasn't angry, but because anger had already subsided, turning into extreme caution. This woman was no longer just a difficult mother-in-law. She became a real threat to my life and my child's life. Around 9 p.m., David drove up to Olivia's house. He didn't go upstairs, but called me. I'm downstairs. I went out onto the balcony and looked down. Under the dim yellow light of the port lamppost stood David, leaning against his car. His face was exhausted. He held a slashin' phone in his hand and looked like a person who hadn't slept for several nights. Before I might have softened at the sight of his fatigue, but now I understood that his fatigue doesn't cancel what he did. Why did you come? Shortly asked I. I want to see daughter. She is sleeping. Then, I want to see you. I was silent for a few seconds and answered, wait. Olivia looked at me with anxiety. Maybe I go with you? No need. Shook my head. I am for a couple of words. If anything, I will call. Going down into the courtyard. I didn't approach close. I stopped at a distance, sufficient for him to understand. I no longer want any intimacy. He looked me over from head to toe. In his gaze mixed fatigue, irritation, and something similar to powerlessness. Did you really decide to bring to taking away the child? This question you should ask your mother, answered I. He ran a hand over his face. I know Mom is wrong, but she just got heated. To come to daycare and try to take my child is called got heated? David froze. Apparently he didn't expect that I would find out about this, so, quickly, I didn't know Mom would go to daycare. Believe you or not already doesn't matter. He stared at me. Sarah, let's not talk like that. However it may be, I am still her father. I never forbade you to be her father, but you pushed me away. I looked him straight in the eyes. You alienated yourself from her at the moment when you allowed your mother to use her as an anchor to keep me. David sighed heavily. I didn't want Mom to go to daycare. I know what she is. Like, I'll talk to her. I smirked. How many times over the last year did you talk to her already? David fell silent. I clearly saw that he still wants to save the situation, but save not our marriage, but his convenient position. He wanted me to calm down, for everything to return to a suspended state. And he would have time to maneuver between mother, mistress, money, and family. But I was no longer in a position to wait for his choice. What do you want? He asked. First, answered I. From this moment, your mother should not approach the child, in daycare or anywhere else without my consent. Good. Second, you won't take daughter for overnight stay for now. David frowned. This is too much. You just ask what I want. This is what I want. He pursed his lips. What else? Third, all further questions you will resolve with my lawyer. His face darkened. Sarah, you firmly decided to turn this into war. Hearing the word war, I turned cold. It turns out, in his eyes, the fact that I am trying to protect my money, my child, hiring a lawyer so as not to be deceived is declaration of war. And what they, with his mother and that woman, did is just family matter. No, answered I. I am just defending myself. David stood silently, and then very quietly said, I broke with Michelle. I wasn't surprised. Sooner or later he had to say it. I explained everything to her. I don't care, David. I really don't care. His face contorted as if he was slapped. Probably he first saw how cold a woman who fell out of love can be. But I didn't try to seem cold. I really no longer wanted to hear any explanations about that woman. Betrayal that came out is already an accomplished fact. Broke he or not is just elimination of consequences, not proof of decency. David looked at me for a long time and then suddenly asked, Are you really going to divorce? This question made me freeze for an instant. Although everything had already reached this point, but hearing these words from his mouth is equal as if someone passed a blade over the heart. And you? Asked I in response. He turned away. I don't want daughter to suffer. I smirked, but rather with sadness than with irony. She already suffers. Since adults around her began living in lies. He said nothing more. We stood in the middle of a small courtyard, night wind, blew, Noise of cars came from afar, and between us was only huge emptiness which already cannot be filled with anything. After some time, David said, "I want to see daughter on weekend. I will think." "Sarah, don't force me. Don't force me to answer right now." He lowered his head, wanted to say something, but changed his mind. Finally, he just threw, "You really changed." "No." I looked at him. I just saw clearly. He got into the car, started it, and drove off. I watched his taillights disappear behind the gates, and in my soul there was no longer that acute pain, as in first days, only deep, bottomless fatigue. Some marriages die not from one big quarrel, but from the fact that after countless lies, one of the spouses suddenly understands that the person sleeping next to them was never a support. Barely had I risen to the apartment, my phone vibrated again. Gloria's number. I didn't answer. She immediately sent a message. "You turn him against his own mother. God will punish you." I made a screenshot, saved it, and turned off the phone. That night, Olivia slept in the same room with me. "Just in case," she said. I didn't object. In the middle of the night, daughter woke up crying. Constantly called me. I hugged her almost until morning and only then could sleep a little. The next morning, barely waking up, I saw a bunch of new messages in the family group chat on husband's side. Gloria wrote a long message complaining that I ran away with the child. Don't let father see daughter. Hired a lawyer to sue for everything and listen to strangers' advice. Below, several relatives began, admonishing me in the spirit. Need to resolve everything peacefully. Cannot let child suffer. Husband and wife, they fight. They make up. I looked at these messages, and it was funny to me. It turns out when truth is not on your side, can just invent another version to evoke sympathy. I answered no one. I just made screenshots and saved them to my folder. In the afternoon, Ann Davis called me. Her voice was serious. "Prepare. Representative from your husband's side just called me. They hinted that if you persist, they will fight for the right of custody over the child." I sat straight. My heart pounded. They dare? Not just dare. They already began. I held the phone, and my hands grew cold. I guessed that this day would come, but hearing from lawyer that they really are going to take my child away, I felt like falling into an abyss. Ann Davis continued. "Right now begin preparing all documents confirming that you are the primary caregiver. Pediatric records, vaccination certificate, receipts for payment, photographs, correspondence with teachers, everything, proving that you are engaged with the child." I clenched the phone harder. I understood from this moment they would strike not only at me. They aimed at the dearest thing I have. After Ann Davis's call, I sat for a long time on the edge of the bed. My daughter slept in the next room, hugging her pink bear. Her lips were slightly parted as if in sleep. Olivia sat at the table, helping me organize documents on, quote, the laptop, and from time to time anxiously glanced at me. In the small room, it was stuffy from daytime sun. Fan buzzed, but I felt cold coming from inside. They began the fight for the child. I knew this day would come, but hearing this from lawyer, I still felt as if my heart was squeezed in a vice. Olivia moved chair closer. "Don't sit like that. We have business." I sighed deeply and nodded. Yes, that same day, Olivia and I divided duties. I went through all documents, from daughter's very birth certificate, vaccination record, receipts for daycare payment, bills from hospital when she was sick, prescriptions, photos, how I take and pick her up from daycare, photos of our daily life, correspondence with teacher, receipts for milk, results of scheduled checkups. Every piece of paper, which before was just part of routine, now became proof of simple truth. Child was raised by me. Holding in hand some of these papers, I felt acute pain. Certificate from hospital when last year she had pneumonia. That night, I alone took her to a hospital because David was on a business trip. Gloria called and scolded me that I don't know how to watch the child. Photo from her 4th birthday where I inflated balloons from very morning, while David at this time was texting with Michelle, of which I didn't suspect. These seemingly trifles now combined into single picture reflecting marriage, which long rotted, and I only now gathered courage to see it. Around 3 p.m., I brought documents to Ann Davis's office. She sat with me, almost 2 hours, very thoroughly sorting everything. Evidence on property in one stack, proof of threats, attempts to self-willedly take child from daycare into another. Documents confirming that I am primary caregiver into separate folder. Sorting papers, she said. Remember, if they want to take the child away, they will act in 2 directions. First, say that you are emotionally unstable, took the child away, and don't let fathers see. Second, create image of loving family from father's side which has more opportunities, and can better take care of her. I clenched fists. But from very birth mainly I am engaged with her. I know. And these documents prove it. But don't underestimate how people can distort facts. I looked up at her. You mean they can lie? Ann Davis smirked. You think people who plan to buy apartment with your money and throw you out of documents will be shy to lie? These words were like tub of cold water on last remnants of my naivety. Yes, I could no longer measure others with my measure of decency. Before my departure, Ann Davis gave me a draft statement for police and daycare, where facts of grandmother's attempt to take child were set out, as well as attached screenshots of threats. You don't need to accuse anyone. Instructed, she, just record events. In future, every such mark will be very important. I nodded. Leaving the office under bright evening sun, I stood on sidewalk tightly pressing, folder with documents to chest. In soul rose strange feeling mixture of sadness and determination. Probably any woman driven to the point that she has to protect her right to be mother with help of papers feels how something inside her breaks forever. In the evening, I still didn't dare return to old apartment. Olivia said to stay for a few more days. I knew I couldn't sit at friends forever, but at least in these days, presence of another adult in house gave me a little tranquility. I wrote to David that everything is fine with daughter, and that if he wants to see and her on weekend, he must warn in advance, and meeting will pass in my presence or in presence of person I trust. David didn't answer immediately. About an hour later came short message. You make a stranger out of me. I looked at these words and was tired so much that didn't even get angry. Stranger. Stranger is the one who sleeps next to wife but hides mother, mistress, money. Stranger is the one who allows his mother to go to child's daycare and then accuses child's mother that she is afraid. Next morning, when I was preparing to take daughter to daycare, teacher called. Sarah, this morning girl's dad called me. I froze. What did he say? He asked what time classes end and said he wants to pick her up today. I answered that only with your consent. I closed eyes for a second and answered, please stick to this rule. If someone, except me or Olivia, comes, do not give the child. Teacher hesitated and then quietly said, Dad was not very pleased. I smirked. Never mind. Main thing child is safe. Hanging up, I felt completely broken. David began to act. Maybe he didn't file to court yet, but he step by step created appearance that he has natural right to. Child, and I am the one who hinders him. Ann Davis was right. They will distort history in their favor. In afternoon, I filed report to police by place of residence and took official notice to daycare. Having done this, I felt breathing became a little easier. At least, if something happens, I will have not only words. But that same day, happened one more event. Around 4 o'clock, Olivia was in kitchen, and I just returned with daughter from drawing lesson. Opening apartment door, I saw that someone is sitting at threshold. It was Aunt Nina, younger sister of my mother-in-law. She rarely communicated with me, but every meeting ended with moralizing, from which it was nauseating. Seeing me, Aunt Nina jumped up. Finally appeared. I pressed daughter to myself. Hello. Did you want something? She crossed arms on chest. Wanted since came. Whatever you do there, don't involve the child. Running away from home with child is not good. I looked at her and was no longer surprised. Gloria obviously was calling all kin, creating her image of me. I didn't run away. I just temporarily took child to safe place. What safe place? It is your husband's home, not robber's den. I smirked. You are right. Not a den, but enough for grandmother to come to. Daycare to pick up granddaughter without mother's consent. Aunt Nina blinked. Well, grandmother missed granddaughter. Missed. And decided to steal her. She raised voice. Don't cling to words. Adults do everything for sake of family. I suddenly felt funny from these words. For sake of family. All these days, everyone covered behind family to force me to be silent, endure, agree to, deception. No one asked what I feel. No one thought what will happen to child, who was turned into instrument for blackmail. I opened the door and clearly said, if you came to persuade me, return and endure cannot continue. Aunt Nina got angry. You talk like that to elders. No wonder mother-in-law can't stand you. This time I didn't retreat. Think what you want. But from this moment who touches my child, I will not be silent. Probably my voice was firm enough because Aunt Nina froze. My daughter stood behind my back, tightly hugging Bear, and looked at her with frightened eyes. Aunt Nina glanced at her, snorted, and said, Look, arrange scandal. First will suffer, child. I holding door coldly answered, Suffer or not, I will decide myself. And you, don't come here anymore to teach me how to be mother. She opened mouth to say something. But at this moment from kitchen came Olivia, with wooden spatula in hand and with icy face. Leave. Here is not place for you to yell at my friend. Seeing reinforcements, Aunt Nina retreated, but before entering elevator turned around. You will still regret. Elevator doors closed. Corridor emptied. I leaned back against door and felt legs give way. Olivia immediately supported me. Are you okay? I nodded, but tears suddenly gushed themselves. Since very beginning of this story, I for first time truly cried. Not because still loved David, and not because regretted marriage. I cried from fatigue to protect myself, protect child, fight off whole army of people who under pretext of kinship pushed woman back where she was humiliated. Olivia hugged me and let cry out. My daughter ran up and hugged my legs. Mommy, who offended you? I sat down and hugged her. Tears still flowed. No one, honey. I just got tired. She, with her small hand, wiped my tears. Mommy, don't be sad. I love you. These words were like soft blades slicing along sorest spot in my heart. I tightly hugged her and understood as never before. I have no way back anymore. If I retreat, not only me but also this child will be sucked back into this poisonous pool. In the evening, putting daughter to bed, I sat at table and wrote for a long time. Not statements, not statements, not evidence. I compiled short list for myself. 1. Find new rented apartment as soon as possible. 2. File official petition to court if pressure continues. 3. Be morally ready for complete rupture of this marriage. Having written these 3 lines, I put down pen. Hands trembled, but on soul was strange tranquility. Probably at some moment when persons suffered enough, their soul itself learns to be hard. Outside window night wind stirred curtains. In darkness, I sat for long time and knew my next step will be no longer defense. I will start truly leaving this marriage. Next morning I woke up with sensation, as if endured long fever, head heavy, eyes dry, throat scratchy, but mind was clearer than ever. Probably when person reaches bottom they cease fearing fall. I sat on edge of bed, looked at sleeping daughter, remembered 3 lines written yesterday, and told myself, today need to start acting without delay, without waiting. Marriage rotten to core longer, it drags more humiliates. First thing I wrote to Ann Davis. Ann, I decided, I will prepare documents for court. She called back almost immediately. Are you sure? I looked out window. Morning sun-flooded balcony of neighboring apartment with thin golden stripe. Sure. She was silent for a few seconds and then said, then from this moment every your step must be clear. First, new housing. Second, documents. Third, accounts income, expenses for child. Fourth, minimize emotional dialogues. I wrote down every point. Yes, and one more thing. What if your husband or his family continues to pressure? Don't meet with them alone. Always must be witness. Hanging up, I saw Olivia put before me glass of warm milk. I already called. Acquaintances asked about rented apartments near daycare. I looked up at her. So fast? You still ask? Found option need immediately. Go look. I took glass, feeling simultaneously gratitude and bitterness. There are people not connected with you by blood, but ready to stand on your side at most necessary moment. And one with whom shared bed invented ways take away from you money, child, and corner. Around 10 a.m., Olivia drove me to look at 2 apartments. One was deep in 10 courtyard, cheaper but dark and noisy. Second, in small residential complex 10 minutes drive from daycare. 2 small rooms, narrow kitchen, tiny balcony, but clean with surveillance cameras and reliable lock. Barely entering, I felt inclined to this option. Not because it was beautiful, but because gave feeling that can close door and start everything from scratch. Let cramped, let modest. But it's better than living in spacious old apartment with constant feeling, as if sitting on glass shards. Landlords were couple of middle years, spoke softly. They listened with surprise to my detailed questions about lock surveillance, but answered everything. When, they said, if apartment likes, then need to leave deposit today. I almost didn't hesitate. I take, said I to Olivia. Olivia decisively nodded. Correct take. Signing lease agreement and handing over cashier's check for deposit and first month, I felt my hands shaking. Not due to money, but because understood what this means. This meant I truly leave that marriage not in thoughts, but in deed. Path back became narrower, but, strangely, I felt not fear, but bitter relief. Like person who was kept under -40F, water for long time, and who finally could surface, though lungs burst from pain. At that moment my phone rang. David. I looked at his name and answered. What? His voice on other end of wire was husky. I am downstairs at Olivia's. I froze. What are you doing there? I want to see daughter. You warned? David, don't complicate. I looked at Olivia. She only pursed lips, letting know that I be calm. I am not. There, said I. Where are you? I am not obliged to report to you about every step. He sighed heavily. I just want to see her for a minute. I was silent, and then answered. Today evening. If want, I will bring her to cafe. Downstairs our old house. I will be nearby. I am her father. Why should I meet with her like prisoner? And you think who brought everything to this? On other end of wire fell silent. I hung up feeling habitual alertness. David was nervous more than I thought. Either he really missed daughter or understood that as soon as I find new housing and finally separate, everything will slip out of his hands much faster. In afternoon, I sent lease agreement to Ann Davis for verification. She answered, quickly, everything is fine act. Immediately after that, she sent me draft petition for divorce, where were clearly spelled out requirements about determination of residence, of child division of property, return of money, which David transferred to his mother. I sat before screen and read every line, and my hands turned cold. Word, divorce, typed on paper, felt quite not like in thoughts. It was final and painful. I no longer pitied David, but pitied myself, the one who was 5 years ago. That girl who believed in normal family, believed that if live humanly then to you will, treat so too. In evening as agreed, I brought daughter to small cafe so David could see her. I chose table by window, whence everything was visible, and whence easy was to leave. Olivia with Masha sat at neighboring table. When David entered, he froze for a second, apparently not expecting I would come with reinforcements. My daughter, seeing father, rushed to him. Daddy! At that moment my heart anyway pricked. Whatever was between adults, child's feelings for father were real. David snatched her up, his face softened. He asked her about everything bought. Her cake milk spoke with her, with such tender voice, as if nothing bad happened. In last days, I sat and looked, and on my soul was heavy. Some people, not that, I don't love their children, just they lack decency, love them so as not to cause pain their mothers. After some time, David seated daughter on chair and looked at me. I want to talk to you alone. There are no alone, shook I head. David, I already said everything. He clenched glass in hand. I know you are going to move. I wasn't surprised. Probably he guessed when didn't find me at Olivia's. I am preparing. You must bring to this? I looked at him. And you think there is other way out? He was silent, and then said, I can move out with you and daughter. We completely stopped communication with my mother. With money, I will figure out. Give me last chance. I looked at him for a long time. Outsider probably would count this big step towards, but not me. I too well knew David. He gives promises only when he is cornered. He doesn't change at root. He just wants to keep what leaves from hands. And Michelle? Asked I. His gaze went blank. I broke with her. I don't believe you anymore. No, don't know. I put hands on table and very quietly but firmly said, if you really knew you, wouldn't bring me to taking child, renting new apartment, hiring lawyer, collecting evidence. My daughter ate cake and didn't pay attention to conversation. David looked at her and then at me. His voice broke. I don't want to lose daughter. May too. Then why you push me away? I smirked. Again, I push away. He went numb. Listen carefully, continued I. I am not forbidding you be father, but I won't be your wife anymore. David's face turned white, although he probably guessed this moment would come. But hearing this from me, he looked as if something was taken away from him. You decided? Huskily asked he. Yes. And there is no other way. No. He sat silently for a long time, and then suddenly sadly smiled. And I thought you would forgive. I looked at him. Exactly because you always thought I would forgive you became like that. These words made both of us fall silent. Cars passed outside Window Street. Lights lit up. People in cafe laughed and talked. And only our table seemed to be outside all these sounds. When we were leaving, David hugged daughter for long time. Daddy, will you go home with us? Asked she. He stumbled for a second. I am little busy. Tomorrow I will call you, okay? She obediently nodded. I took her in arms and went, and my nose stung. I didn't cry, but I understood that from today that family of 3 people, which as my child thought will always be, finally fell apart. In evening, returning to Olivia, I received message from unfamiliar number. Are you Sarah? I am Michelle. Think you should know some things. I froze in middle of living room with cold phone in hands. I knew next wave came, and this time it could bring secrets about which I didn't even suspect. I froze in middle of living room, looking how message from Michelle lit up and went out on screen. Olivia cleaning kitchen saw my strange face and asked, What is it? I showed her phone. Olivia read and frowned. Where did this come from? I didn't answer immediately. Inside me was not so much anger or curiosity as strange sensation, as if another door opens slightly, and behind it hides something even dirtier, deeper, which can change everything. Olivia moved chair. Will you answer? I reread line again. Think you should know some things. Even few days ago, I would probably just delete this message, wishing to have nothing common with her. But now I learned expensive lesson. There is truth painful to hear, but which needs to be heard. Because if miss at least one fragment, others may use it against you. I sat and typed reply. What do you want to say? Answer came almost instantly. We can meet. I don't want to write on phone. Olivia stared at screen. Don't meet with her alone. I nodded and wrote, If meet then, in public place, and I come not alone. Message from her came in few minutes. Good. Tomorrow, at 3 p.m. Cafe Mocha, on Main Street. I read and put down phone. In head began to scroll variants. Maybe Michelle wants to justify herself or accuse David or find out what I know. Or maybe she wants to use me to avenge someone. Anyway, I shouldn't have lost vigilance. Next morning I told Ann Davis about everything. Having listened, she thought for few seconds and then said, Meet is possible, but on 3 conditions. Which ones? Not alone. Don't drink anything. That don't control. And most important, turn on. Recording app on your phone. I immediately nodded. Yes. She carefully looked at me and added, Mistresses usually appear in 2 cases. Either when they still hope to take your place, or when they understand they, themselves, were used. This message most likely from second category. These words made me think, you mean her too could use? Not excluded. But, any case, don't show sympathy prematurely. Listen first, then decide. I wrote down all her instructions. Leaving the office, I took Lily to Olivia's for her afternoon nap, and then drove to Cafe Mocha on Main Street. Olivia came with me and sat at a table in the back, close enough to see everything but not interfere. Michelle arrived a few minutes early. Seeing her in person, I realized she was younger than I thought, maybe 25. She wore a beige sundress, her hair slightly curled. Her face was carefully made up, but it didn't hide her fatigue. Compared to my image of a woman stealing someone else's husband, she didn't look like a winner. On the contrary, seeing me, she stood up and hesitated, not knowing where to start. I sat opposite her, placing my phone face down on the table. The recording app was already running. Thanks for coming. Michelle spoke first. Say what you wanted to say, I said evenly. She bit her lip, then lowered her voice. First of all, I apologize. I didn't answer. This apology, whether early or late, could change nothing. Apparently realizing this, Michelle continued. I know I have no right, and I don't expect forgiveness. But there are things that if I don't say, in the end, you will suffer the most. I leaned back in my chair. Such as? She opened her purse, took out a manila envelope, and placed it on the table. I didn't touch it. These are printouts of some messages and Venmo transactions I managed to screenshot before. Before everything ended, I looked at the envelope, my heart beating faster. Where did you get these? I saved them for self-protection. I smirked bitterly. You also know you need to protect yourself. Michelle's face turned pale. She nodded. Yes, because I realized they weren't just lying to me, they were using me. I stared at her. Who are they? David and his mother. Everything inside me went still, but I maintained my composure. Explain. Michelle took a deep breath. At first, I really was just seeing David. I knew he had a wife and child, but he said your marriage had long since gone cold, that you were together only for the daughter's sake. Like a fool, I believed him. I remained silent. These words from another woman might have caused anger once, but now I was more interested in what came next. And then, after a while, his mother contacted me herself. Hearing this, I felt the tips of my fingers go numb. She invited me to coffee. She spoke very softly. She said that I suited David better, that you weren't worthy of him, that you held onto your money too tightly, and that your marriage would fall apart sooner or later anyway. She said if I was patient, she would help me. I watched her without blinking. Help how? Michelle lowered her head. Her voice became quieter. Make it so you would. Leave. Silence hung between us. The noise of the espresso machine, the scraping of chairs, the clinking of spoons, it all seemed so distant. I heard only her words. Speak more concretely, I demanded. I want to hear it verbatim. Michelle swallowed. She said you only live with him because of your uncle's inheritance. As soon as they bought the Riverside condo using those funds to secure the down payment, you would lose all value. She said David should gradually distance himself from you, and I should appear at the right moment, and you would leave out of sheer exhaustion. My chest tightened. Although I knew Gloria despised me and plotted schemes, hearing that I would lose all value once they got my money was like a knife, twist in the heart. It turned out, in her eyes, I wasn't a daughter-in-law, wasn't the mother of her grandchild. I was just a resource, to be drained, and a temporary obstacle. You said you have printouts. What are they? Michelle slid the envelope toward me. Texts between me and Gloria. And transaction. I opened the envelope. Inside were screenshots of text messages and Zelle, transfert confirmation. I looked at the texts first. My stomach churned. Gloria. Keep him happy, honey. Things are tense at home with Her Highness, pinching every penny. He needs an escape. Gloria. Don't worry about the timetable. Once the condo closes, things will. Move faster. Just be patient. You're the right fit for this family. I read them, and my hands shook. Not from pain, but from sheer disgust. She had actually coached this woman, using her to distract David while they orchestrated the financial theft. I flipped to the transaction screenshots. Several transfers from Gloria Patterson to Michelle Vance. $200 here for a spa day. $300 there for a new dress for tonight. I looked up. Why was she sending you money? Michelle lowered her head. She said it was to help me look my best for David, to keep him interested. She said you had let yourself go. She laughed, bitterly. I realized later it was just bait, to keep me playing my role. What role? The role of the wedge. The distraction. I put the papers back on the table. A cold chill ran down my spine. What I had guessed, what I had pieced together in my head, now took on a clear, horrifying form. This wasn't just infidelity. This was a long con operation by Gloria Patterson. Use my money to buy the asset for her son. Use the child to pressure me into compliance. And use another woman to destroy my self-esteem and marriage. So I'd eventually give up and leave with nothing. Does David know you were talking to his mother? Michelle looked up at me with reddened eyes. At first, no. Then he found out. He was furious with her, said she was meddling too much. But he kept seeing me because it was convenient, because I was the easy one. I smirked. Convenient. Michelle was silent. That silence was the answer. Why are you telling me all this today? Michelle was silent for a long time. Because they threw me away too. I wasn't surprised. When you left, her voice broke. David started avoiding me. He was panicking, and his mother changed her tune completely. She called me and said, now wasn't the time, that I was a liability, and to stop bothering her son while they fixed the mess. She called me a cheap distraction. I looked at her, and for the first time saw the utter humiliation of her position. A woman who thought she could enter someone else's life and replace the wife, only to find herself a pawn on Gloria's chessboard, discarded the moment the game got tough. I didn't feel sympathy, but I understood. What do you want from me? Nothing, Michelle answered quietly. I just thought you should know the whole truth. And if needed later, I'm willing to confirm everything about the money from Gloria and the meetings. I closed the envelope and put it in my purse. This evidence was nuclear. It was the final hammer blow that pulverized whatever remained of my marriage. I stood up. I promise you nothing, but if necessary, my lawyer will contact you. Michelle nodded, wiping a tear. I turned and walked out of the cafe. Olivia immediately followed me. At the exit, she looked at me and asked, something new? I clutched my purse tightly. My voice was dry as dust. It wasn't just an andatis. Affaire, Olivia. Olivia froze. I looked at the sun-drenched street, and the words fell like stones. It was a conspiracy orchestrated by Gloria from the beginning. The mistress was just another tool she used to try and break me while they stole the money. Olivia uttered a curse word that made a passerby turn his head. "Let's go," I said. "Anne needs to see this immediately." I sat in Olivia's car, still clutching the manila envelope from Michelle, feeling a strange, heavy calm. It seemed I should have been furious, shaking, feeling the world collapse all over again. But no, perhaps after peeling back so many layers of lies, a person reaches a point where pain no longer explodes. It just settles, heavy as lead, and turns into cold resolve. Olivia drove slowly, glancing at me periodically. "Are you okay?" I stared out the window. The evening sun stretched shadows across the asphalt. Cars rushed back and forth, as usual. The city was brutally normal. "I'm okay. You don't look it." I gave a dry chuckle. I just saw the finale of the play. All that's left is to drop the curtain. When we got back to Olivia's, I didn't wait until tomorrow. I immediately called Ann Davis and briefly stated that I had new critical evidence. An hour later, I was sitting in her office again, and spread out before her were all my documents, neatly sorted into stacks. Ann Davis read through the bank statements, showing Gloria's transfers to Michelle, looked at the text between mother and mistress, and then silently placed the papers on the desk. "Enough." I looked up. "Enough for what?" To put a period at the end of this sentence. Her voice wasn't loud, but every word felt like a nail being driven in. "Regarding property, we have proof your husband was siphoning marital funds to his mother without consent. We have proof they drafted documents to defraud you of your equity in the potential new condo. Now, we have proof the mother-in-law was actively funding the destruction of your marriage using marital assets passed through her son." She leaned forward. "Regarding the child, we have the attempted unauthorized pickup at daycare. We have threats. We have a full documentation package proving you are the primary caregiver." She tapped the envelope from Michelle. "And on the moral side, we don't just have infidelity. We have a conspiracy. If you delay now, Sarah, this evidence could grow stale. We need to strike while they are scrambling." I was silent for a moment, then asked, "Then let's act, Anne." She nodded immediately. That day, I signed the formal petition for divorce. As I signed my name for the percent for the Brost and Drayton 70. Last time as David's wife, my hand trembled slightly. Not from regret, but from the realization that from this moment, my 5-year marriage was over on paper, by law, with a determination that knew no retreat. Some breakups happen in tears. Mine began in a bright office, under the rustle of papers, the scratch of a pen, and the cold smell of printer ink. Leaving the office, I didn't go back to Olivia's immediately. I walked for a long time down the sun-drenched streets of downtown Charlotte, thinking about my uncle. I called him. On the other end of the line, his voice grew serious as he heard my account of the latest revelations. He was silent for a long time, then said just one phrase. "You did everything, right, kid? If they don't consider you family, don't waste your life trying to prove something to them." Hearing that, my nose stung. "Don't cry." His voice was gruff but solid. "You have a child. Show weakness. Now. And you lose." I took a deep breath and nodded, as if he were standing in front of me. Yes, 3 days later, David was served with the divorce papers. He called me, nonstop. My phone grew hot in my pocket. I didn't answer. All communication was now routed through the lawyer. I had no reason to listen to his justifications anymore, but on the evening of the 3rd day, he ambushed me outside my new apartment complex. He must have followed Olivia from daycare, or just guessed where I might look for cheap housing. When I saw him standing under an oak tree near the parking lot, I realized the time had come for the final battle. He walked over. His eyes were red, rimmed, his face unshaven. "Sarah, you really filed." I stopped a few steps away, gripping Lily's hand tightly. "You got the documents? Why ask? You are so cruel." I looked at him, and I felt more amusement than anger. Cruel? I told you everything that would happen. I wanted to come back. What else do you want? Did you want to come back because you repented? Or because you realized you were about to lose everything? The money, the condo, the reputation? I asked in return. He fell silent. That silence was the clearest answer. My daughter, standing beside me, looked up at him and whispered, "Daddy, why aren't you coming home? With us?" This question was like a small blade slicing through everyone. David's eyes reddened. He squatted down and hugged her. This time, seeing this scene, I wasn't angry. I felt only boundless fatigue. Because no matter what, this child was his daughter, and her pain would be the longest lasting. David hugged her, then looked up at me. "I won't fight you." I froze for a second. "What do you mean?" "I'll sign everything. Property division, the divorce, full custody to you." I stared at him, trying to understand if this was another maneuver. He smiled, sadly. "I lost Sarah." I froze. Not at the word lost, but at the realization that in the end he saw our marriage as a game where there are winners and losers. And I, from the very beginning, just wanted it to be a home. A few days later, by agreement of the lawyers, we met for the last time in mediation to finalize the settlement agreement. David really didn't fight for custody. Probably. He realized my evidence file was too complete. Or perhaps, after the proof concerning his mother paying off his mistress was laid on the proof table, he simply had no strength left to resist. The shame of that, becoming public record, would destroy Gloria in their social circles. The money he transferred to his mother, he had to repay according to a schedule. The inheritance money from my uncle was recognized as my separate property, untouched. I retained primary physical custody of Lily. He received visitation, rights according to a standard schedule, and our marriage officially ended on safe 4-3. Paper. The day the court approved all the documents, the sky was clear. I walked out of the courthouse with Olivia and stood under the trees for a long time. I didn't cry, didn't laugh, just felt like a boulder I had carried for years fell off my shoulders. Olivia hugged me. "It's over." I called my uncle. He said, "Since it's finished, live with dignity and don't look back." I answered, "Yes." Lily and I finally moved into our small 2-bedroom apartment. The first while was hard. We had to arrange everything, get used to the new route to daycare, make ends meet on my own. And at nights, when Lily missed her father and asked, "Mommy, why is our home different now?" I just hugged her and quietly said, "Because now we will live where it is peaceful." I started taking freelance translation work, working remotely for a company my uncle recommended. The money wasn't much, but it was enough for Lily and me. Olivia still helped. My uncle sometimes sent money, but I took it only in extreme cases. I wanted to stand on my own feet, not to prove something to someone, but so I would never again live in the humiliating feeling of dependence and calculation. David visited daughter several times after the divorce. I didn't interfere, just kept my distance. And Gloria, as I heard, after the whole story came out, and her plus Liz. Financial manipulations became known to the extended family, no longer dared to appear in my sight. Where Michelle went, I don't know. And I didn't care anymore. There are people who caused you pain, but over time they become just names flickering in memory. The main thing is that my daughter and I survived the darkest period in our lives. One evening, many months later, having put Lily to bed, I sat alone by the bronzed window, looking at the city lights, and suddenly realized happiness is not preserving a marriage at any cost. Let go of what has rotted to save what is still alive inside you. If that day in the riverside condo I had continued to endure, to deceive myself that everything would work out, I would probably still be living in a beautiful house, but with a dead soul. And now, albeit in a small apartment with modest furnishings, where I have to count every penny, I feel cleaner and stronger than ever. I lost a marriage, but I saved my child. Saved the inheritance my uncle gave me for a rainy day, saved my dignity, and most importantly, I saved myself.